3 days.
Burns is a liar.
Yankee, just
I
give
can't,
up.
Yankee. What do you?
I think he said Dylan Burns is a fucking liar, which I agree with.
Can we just give
you agree
Yankee
with
like a
Yankee
second?
Tanky.
Because
Schizos
he's
unite.
barely at any time.
Yankee's fucking base. Oh no.
Nobody can hear him.
That's the new rule. Ah, DMs. Was anything in there important? No, they were all bad. Just Danabo begging me to leave this debate. Dylan to suck. Hello.
With where we are right now, there's Russia versus Ukraine. Where do y'all really stand on this war? How do you feel about it? What do you think we should do about this war? And we'll start this with Abolition.
Hey everybody. So my position on the war is I would like there to be peace talks. However, I think it's unacceptable for there to be peace talks that include concessions to Russia over territorial loss because of the territorials that they're claiming is not currently in their occupation. So I think Russia needs to be a little realistic with its demands. I mean, yeah, I guess that does definitely put me pro-Ukraine, but that's just my observation of what's going on, and I'm sure everybody has more nuanced takes, but that's what I think.
Okay, Nakai, is that how you pronounce it?
Nikki? Okay, my position is I think we should call for peace, and I would say that I'm more sympathetic to the Russian side because of the background and everything that's gone into it. And it seems to be what the people of the regions voted to become a part of Russia. So that's my position.
The man who went to Ukraine, Dylan Burns.
I'm very supportive of the Ukrainian position. I believe that all Russian soldiers should exit all of what is recognized as Ukrainian territory. It's obviously a war of aggression on their part. They're trying to annex large swaths of land. I think that's wrong. They've engaged in reprehensible behavior that I think should be punished, as in war criminals should be tried no matter what side it was on. But I think it's pretty obvious like where the vast majority of the war crimes are coming from. And I think the easiest way to end suffering as soon as possible, as well as guaranteeing Ukrainians a better future where they could dictate, their own nation and what it should be on their own terms, is with Russia leaving. I think that Zelensky's proposed 10-point peace plan is very reasonable. It's probably not going to be the end of negotiations. He's probably not going to get everything on the list, but I think it's a good starting point for negotiations. A much better one than like recognizing what was like largely like an illegal annexation of large swaths of territory with illegitimate referendum. So I support the Ukrainian position. I hope Russia leaves Ukraine.
Non-smoker.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, I'm an American, so I should probably acknowledge that like most of what I say is specifically from that perspective. I don't try to speak for the Ukrainian people. I don't try to speak for the Russian people. That being said, I've found that this whole discourse has become like really, really, for lack of a better term, like totalitarian on the pro-Ukraine side. I found that the pro-Ukraine side tends to act as though there is no valid Russian perspective whatsoever. So just having any Russian sympathies means that you're automatically on the side of pro-Russia. And if that's true, then I guess I'm on the side of pro-Russia. I don't think Russia is a perfect country. I don't think Putin is like a perfect leader or anything like that. But I also try to look at world events very pragmatically. So with that being said, I think I try to consider both perspectives. And first and foremost, obviously I want peace. But I also think that what gets lost in this entire conversation all the time, far too often, is the autonomy of the people in Eastern Ukraine and their right to sovereignty of their own, whatever they define that as. So I guess if that makes me super pro-Russia, then I'm super pro-Russia.
Ginger.
I would say that I am pro-Ukraine. I feel like Russia has no business there. They clearly have, Ukraine wants nothing to do with them. Putin is a dictator, not a leader. And they need to leave. And if we can do something about it, we should.
Schlatsky.
I'm just a guy in America, and I think that we should keep all of our weapons at home, defend Americans instead of the whole planet that don't. And we have no plans, it seems, to include them in any of our alliances, whether that be the EU or NATO. So we should probably just drop the trade and stop sending weapons over there. I'm all for humanitarian aid, medical, food, that kind of thing, but not for exporting food from Ukraine. I don't think that's worthwhile. But yeah, basically no weapons to Ukraine.
Naysguard.
I think that Russia has been provoked and felt they were backed into a corner. And we denied talking to Putin since Obama was in office. We wouldn't talk to him. We made jokes about it. And if you're not going to have dialogue, you're going to end up having a fight. So, you know, go to the table, start talking, and put whatever got us to this point. We can debate that tonight. But if it's so that we can not repeat it again, great. I'm all for finding the solution so people aren't at war anymore. You know, that's it.
Somebody online.
Well, howdy, hi, Queen Alexa. Thank you very much for having me here. I really do appreciate the Political Shit Show for hosting this event. Of course, I am somebody online. Some of you folks might know me. The rest of you folks don't yet, but I'm sure you will by the end of this. As far as the whole Russia versus Ukraine thing, we have to remember that, like, there used to be this kingdom in, you know, Eastern Asia or Eastern Europe, Northern Asia. It was like the Federation of Russia. It was ruled by the Romanov family. Then there was this whole like Soviet Union thing, and they conquered like a whole bunch of extra area by like annexing all these places. And then a new country was founded, and it's like the Russian Federation. It's a whole completely different thing that came to be. So like there's this distinction between these two different places. Now, back during the Cold War, there was like the East versus the West, and you got to remember we're the West, and like there was the East, and it was the Soviet Union versus, well, the Soviet Union lost, and they don't exist anymore. And now the West has conquered the rest of the world. And Russia's throwing a little temper tantrum over here and being like, we're still the Romanovs. We still get to own the whole Soviet Union. We get to control the world. But I'm sorry, that's really not the way that it works. Everything belongs to the United States now. So you have to do what we say, and you have to stop throwing your temper tantrum in Eastern Europe. That's ours now.
The Sprouticus.
So it's very clear what Putin's trying to do. Putin is trying to, before he leaves power, he's trying to have this big momentum of I got this land back for Mother Russia. I find this war as something that was completely avoidable had Putin's ego not gotten in front of him. But Russia needs to back out. Russia needs to leave Ukraine to Ukraine, and they need to sit quiet for a little while. If they continue to push this, especially if they continue to try to take other nations that were a part of Russia or USSR or whatever you want to call it, the basic same country, then you're also talking going into Poland. You're talking going into several other nations that are part of NATO, and the NATO agreement is that if someone attacks their country, we treat it as if they attacked ours. So if Russia does not want to get blown out of the water, I would highly suggest leaving Ukraine and not attacking another country.
Yankee, thank you.
Okay, with this. The facts are that Vladimir Putin has done nothing wrong. He was defending his country against the expansion of NATO and the U.S. imperialists. It is our responsibility as anti-imperialists within the United States to fight against a third world war. We are escalating quickly, fastly, to a nuclear holocaust that will kill billions of people. And I hold the United States and NATO as fully responsible for that future reality.
You have a way to turn up your mic a little bit? Because your parts of your words would cut out.
Or stay
Are you in a
close.
bunker somewhere?
You said my mic needs to be readjusted?
Yeah, you sound like you're far away in like a tunnel.
Alexa, look, like Russia's being sanctioned. They can't get new mic equipment.
True. All right, the floor's open. Go at the throat.
So yeah, I'm going to stand again on there's a difference between what the Soviet Union was and then this thing that we have now that they keep calling Russia. But I'm going to remind everybody that the Russia of old that used to be there doesn't exist anymore. This idea that there is this big Russian confederation that owns the entire East is imaginary. And Putin's got this pipe dream and he's all upset about, I'm supposed to be able to control these nations outside of my border because they're like my little puppet states, but they're not anymore. There are puppet states now. We bought them. We get to control them.
What Ukrainian state formation would you like to return to?
The one that we had before 2014.
Because I guess what I'm trying to get at is like you're trying to say that Putin is sort of trying to reform like artificial borders like the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire. I guess the point I'm trying to make with that question is, what were the borders of Ukraine prior to that? Do you know?
So what were the Ukrainian borders prior to
the Russian Empire?
There was no Ukraine before the Russian Empire, before
There was
the
no
Romanovs
United States.
conquered that area.
There was no United States before the British. There was no United States before the British. That does not mean the United States is not valid and existing just because it didn't exist prior to the British.
Well, the United States is about 20 times older than Ukraine.
Disregarding the age, we were just as valid when we had fought the Revolutionary War and won it that we are now.
What Revolutionary War did Ukraine fight and win?
So during World War One, I can answer that. Yeah, during World War One, you had the whites and the reds in Russia during the Russian Civil War.
I said one.
Huh?
Which war did they win?
War did they win?
Yeah, so there was a period during the Blacks' occupation where they had some control over the idea of that what we called Ukraine, and it was really an absence of Russian administration or Soviet administration, and also like the whites having no power to do so.
1917 to 21.
Yeah.
Right, during the Russian Civil War.
Oh, yeah.
When there was no like firm control over Russia itself.
Yeah.
So does everyone here respect the rights of the Confederacy? Right.
Is
They
winning a
seceded from
civil
the United
war
States.
or winning
Wait,
a revolutionary necessary to form a sovereign nation?
Wait, can I
There have been a
respond?
lot of
Yeah, you
nations
have
that
to
been
win a
formed
war
without-
to set your borders.
Let me respond to that.
No, there have been a lot of nations that have been set up without wars. I'm sorry,
difference
Dylan.
is-
Go.
Okay, I would say there's a vast difference between the idea of a Ukrainian state and the idea of a Confederate state. Because the Ukrainian state is based in Ukrainian culture, it's based in Ukrainian language, it's based in the identity of Ukrainianists, it's based in their constitution.
The South wasn't.
The Confederate state was.
What was the South?
It was based in slavery. There was no Confederate
Southern
language.
culture?
There's no Confederate language. There's no. I mean, you could say there's like regional Southern culture.
The only thing you can
but
point to is
there is a-
language, Dylan.
Well, the difference is
They
the
do
Confederate
have a
state was
distinct
founded
culture.
in slavery. The
Culture
Ukrainian
is
state
the
was
outgrowth of
created in
economics.
Ukrainian identity.
Culture is the outgrowth of economics. So the Southern slave economy obviously resulted in a totally different cultural formation in the South than they had in the North.
Would you say that there's a difference between basing your country in slavery and basing your country in national identity? Because the Southern economy, the Southern nation state was created because they were upset that they couldn't do slavery. Like the Ukrainian nation state was created because they were upset at the Russian nation state banning the Ukrainian language. They were upset at the
Banning
suppression.
Nazism.
The Ukrainian language is not Nazism. The Ukrainian language is a language that millions of
Not
people speak.
Ukrainian language.
But the
Why
Russian,
When did
the
Russia
Russian-
ban Ukrainian?
the
When did
Russian-
Russia ban Ukrainian?
1880.
Before the Soviet Union.
Yes, the Russian
Ukrainian
Empire,
was banned.
The Russian Empire banned the
You know what the Soviets did to the Romanovs, right?
What am I supposed to take from that? I'm talking about Russia, not just the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I'm talking about Russia. I'm not talking
Yes.
about the Tsarist Empire.
Okay, so it was okay then for the Ukrainians to break off when the Russian state started to collapse and say, hey, we're going to create our own country because historically our language has been banned, our culture has been prosecuted, and we want to
It was
be
never
able to
banned in the
practice it freely.
Soviet Union. In fact, it was supported.
It was not supported, but it was. I mean, it wasn't. I would say it wasn't banned to speak.
There are more
Ukrainian.
ethnic groups within
But
Russia
they
than
viewed
there are within
Ukrainian
America.
as kind of like a backwater, kind of like a redneck hillbilly people, and you could.
What
take
does it
that-
matter how they view Ukraine?
What
Does
it's how
why
they
why
treat
should we
Ukraine.
send weapons to Ukrainians because
should-
of how they view them?
Well, I never said that.
Because they
I don't know why
violently
you're jumping to that.
attacked.
We're talking
Well, you're on
about
that side.
Weapons.
Well,
You're on
yes,
the
I
pro-Ukraine
am
side.
100% in favor of sending weapons, but we're talking about Ukrainian history right now. In Ukrainian history,
Why?
But
do
that's what I'm wondering.
skip,
Why?
do you want to skip the historical argument? I support it because I believe the Ukrainians are fighting a righteous revolution. I think Euromaidan was good. I think that the liberal democracy that they've set up is much better than the system they have before. The Ukrainian people seem to want to go their own way, and I think they have the right to do that. And I think we should support them in that effort. I think we live in a global economy. It's very difficult for us to kind of isolate ourselves from the world and say we're going to split off and we're just going to let everything go as it will. And I do believe the United States should have a moral foreign policy where we do get involved in foreign affairs. And
We're not the world police. You know that movie was a parody, right? It was like satire.
You can say we're not the world police, but I still think the United States should be active in world affairs and supporting countries and independence.
So we
The
certainly
State
are.
Department agrees with you.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't care.
Yeah, I mean,
How
yeah.
many billions of dollars do you think that is worth giving Ukraine to defend itself?
400.
Children dying, not having clean water.
Like, what, you want a
Jackson.
number? Or what?
Yeah, well, where
I
does
mean-
it stop, Dylan?
I think it
That's what
stops
I'd
when
like to
Ukraine
know.
wins. That's when I think it
So
stops.
we should just pour money into this until whenever.
Until
Maybe
the
it'll
last
never end.
Ukrainian?
Yes.
It could go on for 10
You can
years.
say it's the last Ukrainian, but that takes agency away from the Ukrainian people. Because it's not like
You have
We
no
wouldn't wanna
problem
do
doing
that.
it's not like, what was that?
I feel like you have no problem doing that.
What makes
you
you
love
think
to
that?
speak for Ukrainians? That's kind of like your whole spiel,
I
isn't
went
it?
there and I interviewed Ukrainians. I let them speak into the camera and give their own opinions.
Does that give you the authority to speak for the whole country?
I don't need to speak on the whole country, but if I can look at polling
You're
data
doing that
and
right
tell you
now.
what Ukrainians believe, because we can just look at data and we can see what they believe. Like if I told you that the majority of Americans don't want to give up their nation state to the British, right? I can say that. I can also say that the Mexicans don't want to rejoin the Spanish Empire because I can look at polling data and the general vibe in Mexico and say they don't want to. So I can look at polling data and from my personal conversations with Ukrainians and tell you that the majority of Ukrainians don't like getting bombed, they don't like being invaded, and they don't want their land taken away from them.
Well,
People
Did the
think
rest
that's
of you
have
guys
agency.
not see how much of an op it is that Dylan keeps comparing Ukraine to America fighting the British for their independence?
What do you
Because
mean
those
it's an
two
op?
things,
What does that
those,
even
because
mean?
those two things are not related whatsoever, but you're just trying to get Americans to
Wait,
empathize
no,
with
he was just
Ukrainians
using.
like
He
they're
wasn't
like us.
talking about like he wasn't talking a direct comparison between.
He did that at
He
He did that
LibertyCon.
previously,
No,
but
you
it was
didn't
a Liberty.
understand.
LibertyCon.
You
He's
didn't
done it
know.
many
Hold on.
You
times.
didn't
He did
understand.
that-
You're not understanding what I'm saying right now. What I said.
No, it's easy to
No,
understand.
you're
You're
not.
full of
I'm
shit.
clarifying. Okay, you can be an asshole.
Talking about
if you
polling
want to,
data now. He's
but if-
using.
Let
I'm
let
talking
Dylan
about polling
let him clarify. Let Dylan clarify.
my point was that in the United States, the majority of Americans don't want to be part of the British Empire. In Mexico, the majority of Mexicans don't want to be part of Spain. I don't need to be Mexican to tell you that information. The majority of Mexicans don't want to be part of a Spanish empire.
The
I don't need to be
majority of the
Ukrainian.
Donbass doesn't
I
want to
don't-
be part of Ukraine.
They do want to be
According to
part of
what?
Ukraine. There's
According
no
to what?
polling data that suggests otherwise, but I'm not done.
According
by
to
the
what?
way. Look, I'm sorry.
With
I'm
international
not going to be. I'm not going
There's
to.
everywhere.
there's this referendum they held. You can check
I'm
the
not
results.
done.
One
Yeah.
in 2001 that
I'm
literally
sorry.
no other
Hey,
established
hey,
nation
hey,
considered
hey.
it to be an actual valid.
I do.
You talk about that one, the one that no other
Bro, chill
established
out.
nation
Dylan was
considered to
still
be
talking,
valid.
bro.
Yeah, let Dylan finish his statement and the next person go.
I was
There's
just responding to things that were thrown at me.
I don't need to be Ukrainian to tell you what the majority of Ukrainians believe if there's clear polling data to indicate that. As for the idea that the majority of the people in the Donbass want to be part of Russia, there is no independent polling data suggesting that. If you want to point to the referendum, I can tell you a few.
from
I can
all
tell.
around the world, though.
Jesus Christ, my God, is this going to be the whole debate? I can tell you that if you look at the referendum that you're citing, let me tell you some problems with that referendum. First problem, no displaced people got to participate. If you're going to be voting on the future of your land, I feel that everybody who lives on it should be able to get a say.
So they
Second,
weren't living there, were they?
if you were forced out of
They
your
were
home by
displaced.
war, yeah, they were displaced. So they should be able to vote on what their land, their property, their belongings, what should
Well, they
be.
left.
Want to go. They want to because they were forced because of the war. Now, let me ask you a
Well,
question.
they
Do you think during the American Civil War that we should not allow people displaced from their homes, due to fighting, to vote in elections? Like, we do this. Like, during the American Civil War, we allowed people displaced from their homes by fighting to vote.
The
in their state
referendum was for
elections.
people who live there asking
Yes,
what
if
they
you're
want.
displaced
And if you didn't
because-
live there, then you didn't vote.
But nobody voted. Basically, 15,000
No one voted?
And no, basically no one voted because the problem was they set up.
Do you have a source
Those
for
people
that?
don't count-
Yes,
those
the
people don't
Russian
count
government.
people that
So
stay
the
there?
Russian
The Russian government said no one voted in the
they
referendum.
said about 15,000 people voted. They had about 15,000 people voting around each province. Barely anybody participated, which isn't a huge surprise when you don't allow displaced people to participate, when you set up the referendum in 3 days because you're panicking because
What percentage of people were displaced?
what percent? A very large percentage, probably like 40 to 50%. Like that's a lot of people who did not get to participate.
You know, the total population of Donbass is in the millions, right? So 15,000 out of like what?
We're
5
talking
million
about all
voted.
the referendums, correct? We're talking about the referendums, like the referendums that Russia did recently. They did it in Kherson, they did it in Zaporozhye, they did it in Donetsk, and they did it in Luhansk. And each one of these, when they did these referendums, they gave it like 3 days, 4 days to set it up because they were panicking. They canceled it before, and then they relaunched it because their front line around Kupiansk was collapsing, and they wanted to, like, you know, show to the
You're
world
telling me
that they had control.
15,000 people
I'm telling
voted
you,
in a
a
population of millions.
Yes, that's the problem with the referendum. A very
I would
small
like a source
percentage-
for that.
The
I don't
Russian
believe
government. Go look at their official numbers. They published the numbers. I didn't publish the numbers. The problem was they gave 3 days. 3 days for the people to set up a referendum on whether they wanted to be part of Russia. They didn't allow everybody to participate, not to displace people, not people who were within territory
Dylan,
still
can
held
you
by the
post
Russian
the
government,
source
but
in
they were
show chat?
like, do you want me to get the? I can get.
Yeah, please post it already.
Okay, what do you mean
Fuck's
post
sake.
it already? I'm debating. Oh, you want me to talk?
No,
and
in
post
show
at the same
chat.
time? Or
Well,
like,
There's
what
a
do you
lot
want
of
me to
people
do?
here, bro. You've been talking for a while.
Okay, yeah, but that's because all of you want to respond to me.
I think Sprout had something to say, right? Sprout?
I was just responding to things that were thrown at me. But the 2001 referendum has been widely seen as other established nations as invalid and not a fair election. In regards to someone saying we shouldn't send weapons to Ukraine, the United States should assist Ukraine in sending weapons, mainly because of the Budapest
They haven't
Memorandum.
done shit with what we've given them already. I think
mainly-
that it's not helping. Let's give them guns. It's gonna make them stop shooting, right? It's gonna make the war end. Does that make sense? Does that make logical sense? Does it really make sense to you? Can you please think about it for a second? If we give people more weapons, does that call for peace? How does that work? Can you please explain it to me, please?
Yeah, that's very simple.
So mainly because of the Budapest Memorandum, which was signed by Russia, Ukraine, Britain, and the United States.
What about Minsk?
Which is a memorandum which is a memorandum that forced Ukraine to no longer have any of its nuclear weapons. The agreement also vowed that if aggression took place, the signatories, i.e. Russia, Ukraine, Britain, and the United States, would seek immediate action for the United Nations Security Council to aid Ukraine.
Sprout, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
I just want to know, like, what is the precedent that you are basing on so much faith that the U.S. can establish peace in other parts of the world?
I'm stating that we are there to assist Ukraine because we signed a memorandum that said we would respect its sovereignty and existing borders, and a co-signer of that memorandum has failed to live up to that memorandum, and it involved taking away a country's nuclear weapon system, which, by the way, is a very, very defensive thing to
So
even just
you're
have.
not, dude. So just trying to be clear here.
Ukraine never had Ukrainian nukes. They had Soviet nukes, and they were removed because.
And
Ukraine
when
seceded
Ukraine
from the
became
Union.
Ukraine, they were Ukrainian nukes.
Yeah, you don't just get to
Congratulations.
inherit someone else's nukes because they happen to be on your property, right?
Actually,
Russia
when
took their
Ukraine was
nukes
in
out
the
of Cuba
Soviet,
too.
when Ukraine was in the Soviet bloc, they inherited those nukes from the Central Soviet government of
Right.
Russia.
That's why they made the Budapest Memorandum to get rid of them.
And the Budapest Memorandum is being violated daily by Russia.
Minsk is being violated by Ukraine.
Stomped all over by the Ukrainians. But Sprout, could you just tell me what is the region in the world
Okay.
that you point
Here
to
it
as a
is,
precedent
finally.
that America can establish peace in other parts of the world?
I would say that if I was going to point to a very specific place, I would say Japan.
Oh
Interesting.
shit, dude.
All right. So, do you know, like, how much do you know about America's relationship with the Japanese government?
Are we gonna talk about
I know
Japan
quite a
now?
bit.
Fucking hell.
I see. So,
Yes.
do you think that the best case scenario for Ukraine would be for us to establish the same amount of influence and control that we had over Japan following World War II? We should have that same amount of influence and control over Ukraine, just as we
No,
did Japan.
I'm not saying it's a one-stop shop
Okay.
solution. I'm not saying that.
Can you
Use
find
that.
another comparable example?
No, because this area of the world and the different
No.
Wait.
No.
One second. This area of the world and the geopolitics of this area is something the United States has not ventured into until
You're willing
recently,
to dump billions
giving weapons
into
to
it
Ukraine.
establish peace, but there's no precedent for us being able to do
I'm willing
that.
to dump millions into it to establish Ukraine's
billions.
borders.
Dude, the
I'm
government
willing
there,
to
bro.
I'm willing to
Are
put
you
billions
denial
into it
about
to
that?
establish Ukraine's border.
At least
You,
somebody.
you say the United
what's
States
going
hasn't
on.
been interfering with Ukraine? Are you
I did
kidding
not
me?
say that.
What were the Bidens doing there?
Nobody said that.
No one said that.
You just did, man.
Fucking
I did
bottom
not
of the
say that.
barrel, Queen Alexa.
You
Bottom
said
of the
United
barrel.
States doesn't interfere.
That's why they're content.
Wait. Has the United States as a government has not been interfering with any internation conflicts in that area until recently?
Okay. By the way, can I just say, I looked at
Establishing
the
NATO
data.
bases.
Fucking hell.
Here,
not
Dylan.
interfering.
Here, let Dylan go ahead. Let's Dylan go ahead.
I looked at the data. The last numbers that Russia put out for Kherson, for example, if we're going to look at the Kherson results, is that 25,000 people voted as of September 26th, like a day or two before the whole thing was finalized. 25,000 people out of 250,000, right? That's the Russian estimate. That's the Russian estimate at the high end, and that's if you believe the Russians aren't lying about any of those votes possibly being ballot stuffed, which they showed multiple times on
We all
film,
know Russians
them
invented
participating
lying.
And I'm not saying that Russia-
Ukrainians
what-
would never lie about
what the
anything.
what does that even mean? What does that even?
who were at the election?
You're
Look at
just
him.
tossing it like,
No,
if
no,
we don't
I'm
believe the
fucking shut the
Russians
fuck
are
up. I
lying.
wasn't
Like, bro,
finished.
everyone
Please,
lies.
please.
Yeah,
Like,
here,
we're
Dylan,
human
finish.
beings.
Alexa,
Every
put your
single
dog
human
on a
lies.
leash.
Put yourself on a leash, bro.
And I gotta respond to them. You gotta shut them the fuck up for a
Dylan
second.
can't debate unless he can
Go.
filibuster for 10
Dylan,
minutes at
go.
a time.
You guys asked me a question. I went and got the resource. The majority of Kherson residents did not
All right,
participate
bro,
in the
just
referendum.
read it. Shut the
And that's
fuck up
if
and read it.
25,000 people out of 250,000 at the high end, if you believe Russian numbers, and
That's
don't think they
10%, and it's all
participated in
still
ballot stuffing,
surprisingly small. I
which
don't
they
understand
did.
it.
Which they did. They participated in ballot stuffing.
Show me proof of
They
ballot
lied.
stuffing.
I can show you video of ballot stuffing, but the whole thing this debate's going to be is me getting proof, showing it to you, and then you're going to be like, well, the Ukrainians lie, like you just did.
Dude,
No,
we're
I'm
just asking you for
I'm
one
just
source.
curious. I'm just curious if you had.
Thank
you-
you. Thank you.
Go
That's an
on.
amazing point. I never thought about that. Thank you. I
Yeah, let's
couldn't say a word of
thank
it.
you clarify that.
Yeah, you have to
I've
get that
seen-
mic.
You have to
fixed.
expand on
I've seen
that.
a few interviews of people who were at the referendums, election watching. So, have you talked to any of those people?
Have
or
I
would you
talked
be willing
to the
talk?
Russian
would you be-
hired election
Have you
watchers?
talked-
No, I
Russian
would you be
hired?
willing to
Yes.
talk to
International
any of those
observers?
Yes.
people that were-
Yeah. When
Any
we're
of
talking about,
them?
when we're talking about like Scott Ritter, right? When we're talking about these types of
Was
people,
Scott
yes.
Ritter an election observer?
No, but
There's
that's what
not-
we're talking about.
Okay, so we're talking. Have you
Okay,
talked
have
to
I
any
talked-
election
no,
observers?
I haven't talked to the
Okay.
Russian
Would you
allied
be,
election
would you be
observers.
willing?
But
would you
why
be
do you
willing
trust
to
them?
talk
Why
to
do you
people
trust
who
them
were
as an
there?
election source?
Why don't
Why do you trust them?
Yeah, why
Why don't you?
bro?
The reason I don't trust them is I do not trust Russian observers to monitor.
They're not Russian.
They're
They were-
internet.
Let him answer.
from
Let him answer.
everywhere.
Let Dylan answer. You gotta ask him a
Do you
question.
know
let
what
him answer.
international means?
Oh, really? I don't know. Please tell me.
That means they came
Waste
from
my
somewhere
time.
else. Bro, you're wasting our time. They're not Russian.
There were no
So,
independent
no,
international
hired by
observers or
Russians. Do you have a source that they were
well-respected-
hired
there
by
were-
Russians?
Yes, multiple of them were hired by Russians. They were locals. They were locals that the Russians hired.
Okay, what about the ones who weren't hired by Russians? There's more than one election observer.
Okay, so which
In
election
Donetsk alone, there was
observers- I don't-
127,
my
I believe.
claim- My claim is not a single one of them was credible. Not one. If you can show me one credible election observer, you're gonna bust me up. Any of them. Which one was the one that we would say, yes, this is somebody with independent enough that's not biased enough that they're going to
There's
give an
some people
honest
from
retelling of
Brazil, I
events?
think.
Okay, why would those people be? What about those people? Who are those people?
But they're not related to anything. They're independent.
Because they're
Why-
from
why-
Brazil? What media
Yeah.
companies are they part of? Well, who do they work with?
I don't know.
Because I know people.
I know
who
there
have
was a
gotten
bunch
money
of them.
from
I didn't
Assad
sit there and
regime,
look at
then
every
go off-
single election observer and double check their bona fides. But you're
Well,
saying
is
that
there
they're
a-
not credible on just as much
no,
information.
I'm saying that they're either all biased towards the Russian perspective,
all biased.
or have no record of monitoring elections whatsoever.
All media is biased, bro. All
The
media
problem
is
is,
biased.
there's such a thing as an independent observer. There's organizations that do this independently. It's not like independent observers have not monitored elections that the United States
How
are
did
not
we
friendly
get
with and
the
have turned it out
special
to be true.
privilege of being the only
Why
people
do you
who can
really? By the
force
way,
independent observers?
96% of Kherson. That's what the Russians said. Russians pushed out of Kherson. The streets are filled with people cheering, waving flags. They're excited. If you listen to like the Rusich group talk about how their occupation went, they say that the locals locals despise us. They spit at us. They refuse to speak with us. They don't like us. This is Russian soldiers.
But you're trusting
saying,
Russians now?
Yeah, I will trust them when they're talking about how the locals don't like them.
You trust them when they say what you want to say?
I trust them when they say things that aren't favorable to their narrative because they have no reason for admitting it. Do you understand why I would, for example, if the United States tomorrow said, yeah, we couped Bolivia, we did that, would I say, oh, I'm not going to believe that now? I'd be like, of course I'm going to believe that, because why would they admit to that? If they were, why would they lie about that? Why would they lie to make them look worse? Why would Russian soldiers lie to say that Ukrainians hate them?
Ukraine bombing
Why?
Poland. I was watching your stream
Why?
last night.
Can you answer my question? Why would they? Can you answer my question as this woman rambles?
What's the question
Why?
again? Sorry, I missed it.
Why would the Russian soldiers tell on their blogs to Russian?
They're not Russian
bloggers,
soldiers. It's Rurich, right?
Rusich. They are working for the Russian government.
Does BlackRock work for the American? I mean, BlackRock's not American soldiers.
They're an extension of the American government. When we hire private military companies, they work on our behalf. We are responsible for the actions of those soldiers. The Russian government is responsible for the actions of private military companies they hire. Why did those private military company soldiers say that the locals despise us? They spit at us. They don't like us. Why would they do that? Why?
I don't know what they said. Do you?
So do you think they were
that
lying?
means
I can link you
so
the
that means
blog if you
Ukraine
need
is
more
responsible
evidence.
for Azov, right, and right sector too, right?
Well, yes. If they're under their military banner, they do hold
They literally
responsibility
are.
for the actions of Azov, of course.
So Ukraine
Yes.
is responsible for the actions of Azov and right
Yes,
sector. Cool.
absolutely. Yes. If they give them guns and they give them bullets and they say you're our soldiers, then yes, they are going to be responsible for those actions. But so is the Russian government. And what I'm telling you is that the Russian government lied about 96% in Kherson. There is no polling data pre-war that would ever suggest that the people of Kherson wanted to be part of the Russian Federation. Nonetheless, 96%. These are ridiculous numbers. These are ridiculous numbers.
That's 90%, 96% of
How
the
can you
people who
prepare?
voted. If
How do
only
you prepare an
25,000 people
election?
voted, then it's not. I mean,
What do you have a problem with
we
that
already get
participation
it.
rate? Do you have a problem with that
Dylan.
participation rate? That
All right, Dylan.
5% of the population could decide the future
Wait a
for
minute.
100% of the population.
I got something to
5%.
say.
well, 30% of Americans decide the president,
Just-
right? I mean, we don't even get 50%
not
here.
5%. 5% is ridiculous, and
That's a
that's
difference
and
of
that's
like
if
5
you believe
times.
the Russian government. That's if you believe their numbers.
It's actually
Dylan, this came up when you and I spoke one-on-one, and I kind of feel like even if you acknowledge that the referendums aren't accurate or not fair or whatever, and you know what? I honestly don't know. I mean, I wasn't there. I didn't count every fucking ballot. Who knows, right? But what I would ask you is, how does that give you automatic authority to just say, well, the referendum wasn't valid, and I talked to a couple of people over there, so therefore I'm in the authoritative position to decide, well, they definitely want to be part of Ukraine. I think that's a little
It's not
dishonest.
that I just talked to a couple of people. All polling data seems to suggest that the vast majority of Ukrainians want to be part of Ukraine. There is no data that points in the other direction, including Eastern Ukrainians.
What I'm
I can
trying to
talk
get
about my
at-
personal experience of talking to these people
Okay.
and them
We all
telling me
know
they want
about
to be
that.
part of Ukraine, but
Look,
polling
look,
data
look.
seems to reflect
All
that as
I'm
well.
trying to get at, Dylan, is that there obviously needs to be another referendum, right? At least that's probably what the international community would want to see. The question is whether or not we could do that in a way that was fair to Russia as well as it's fair to Ukraine and fair to the people in Eastern Ukraine and fair all the way around. And my issue with that is there any way to like really establish the parameters in such a manner that everybody can agree on it? And I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think there is. I'd like to think cooler heads prevail, blah, blah, blah. But I just don't. And I think you understand this probably. I just don't think that that's how these things usually play out. It's usually one side kind of has a referendum. And in this case, it was Russian oversight. You think it's therefore invalid. But if it was UN oversight, the Russians would think it was invalid. So,
it's not just that
there's
it's Russian
almost like
oversight. It's just that there's evidence of fraud that they have participated in. And the numbers are ridiculous. 96% in Kherson. They're not even attempting to cover it up.
Yeah. Well, look, again, I think that the only fair way to do this might not even be totally possible, unfortunately. And so I don't really know what the solution is. But again, I'm sitting over here in my country saying like, well, we're pouring billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of weapons into this conflict. And we are actually, and Nikki mentioned this too, we're not any closer to resolving anything. It's just killing more people. And it's becoming incredibly expensive. It's jacking up gas prices. It's fucking Americans. And it's, look, I know that you have a lot of sympathies for the Ukrainian people, this, that, because you're like a great person, right? Or whatever. But at the end of the day, dude, like, I think the real sympathetic thing to do for all parties involved is to look for a quick end to this conflict And in my opinion, the most expedient way to do that is to stop funding Ukraine and giving them weapons.
I feel like that's spineless, though. The problem that I have
Dude.
is it's not.
What American spine do we provide to Ukraine? Spineless.
Look at him go. Look at him go. I wanted to know.
Go on.
We're waiting for you. We're done.
Okay.
Spineless.
No, you all immediately started yelling.
Hey! You said you were gonna let Dylan go. Let Dylan go. And then after Dylan makes his statement, I want to let Ginger, then somebody go.
When we talk about the future of a nation and talk about ending wars and ending conflict, it's not just about stopping the death and stopping the destruction. It's not just about that. It's about also making sure that a nation gets to live the way it wants to. For example, if, let's say, a dictator tried to take over in the United States, I think it would be perfectly fine for Americans to try to overthrow them, even if it would lead to death and destruction, because it would be better to be gone with the dictatorship. It's better to live outside of tyranny than within tyranny. It's better to be dead than live under tyranny. It's definitely an American principle, and it seems to be the same principle that Ukrainians seem to hold pretty close to their heart right now. So it's not just about, oh, how do we stop the fighting as quickly as possible? It's also about liberating their country and them having a democracy in Ukraine and them defending the Euromaidan revolution, which a lot of people died to protect. So I don't think it's just that. And let's also say that just because the war ends doesn't mean the dying ends. As we've seen by how Russia has conducted itself in occupied territory, they're perfectly willing to execute people and engage in atrocities and torture. So just because the fighting would stop doesn't also initially indicate that the violence would stop. That's why you need to get the Russian soldiers out of Ukraine so they can't engage in that type of violent, degenerate behavior.
Was there violence
Ginger,
before Russia?
Hold on.
started
I want to hear
this
from
special
Ginger.
Military operation.
I want to hear from Ginger.
Well, I actually, something that I agree with one of my chatters on is unfortunately we can't let every nation live the way that they want to, because letting a nation live the way they want to is how Russia invaded Ukraine in the first place. But
Do you know how it happened? Do you know how it happened? It doesn't sound like it.
Wow.
I mean, are you gonna
You're an
be rude the
asshole.
entire panel, or is it just the first half of the panel thing? Because I'm curious.
You're making a minor disruption into a bigger one.
That's fine. I think everyone was.
Well,
I
if
think.
you
I
wanted
think.
to
I
talk,
think.
she
I
can
think.
fuck
I
up.
think everyone saw that as a little bit off.
They deserve a little pushback. If she's gonna be a knuckle dragger, I'm gonna treat her like a knuckle dragger.
Dylan, fuck you.
You've been
bro.
talking more than anyone,
dude,
Dylan.
dude,
Shut
dude,
the
dude.
fuck
You-
up.
Yeah, because you are
panel.
responding to me, of course.
Dude, I don't know what triggered
got
you
a
here,
lot
but
to
like, it's
say.
not that serious. Chill the fuck out.
If you call people stupid, don't be mad when people insult you back.
I didn't call anyone.
You're like, I
call
bet
her
you don't
stupid?
know.
Yeah, I never heard
don't know
that.
the nuance.
No, she said she
Like, you
bet
should
she
be-
didn't know. She did. She said she bet she didn't
You're
know.
being an asshole.
You're
Like,
arguing
you
with
could've-
us,
you know what
You're
you
being an
could've done?
asshole.
You could have asked, like, hey,
I
do you
said-
know this?
Do you
could have
know
asked that.
why this started?
This is a
Do you know
panel
why this
discussion
started?
debate.
That's literally what I said.
Yeah, and so if you're gonna be no, that's not exactly what you said. Oh, I bet you don't know. You're saying it's like you're.
I
Okay.
said,
feigning
do you
ignorance
even
upon the person
know?
you're
Do you
talking to.
even know how this started? If you think that, like, if I just don't, do half of you even know how this started? I just don't. I don't know.
Do you
like,
know?
if you don't understand,
I don't know
how
if
it
you know,
started-
Dylan.
Well,
Do you know?
Nikki, why don't
Do
you
any
tell
of
us?
us
Tell
know?
the panel. Yeah, Nikki, tell us how it started.
In 2014, Eastern Ukraine started getting shelling, right? Who did they
Wow.
get shelled by? Their own people, right? It's been since then, right? And they have Minsk agreements. Why would they have a Minsk agreement? And what happened with the Minsk agreement? Can you tell me why? They didn't go through with the Minsk agreements? Is that any reason why Russia's in Ukraine right now, or no? Is that not related at all? Can you tell me? Do you think it is or not?
Is that where you honestly is gonna say it started with the shelling of the Donbass? Is where is your starting point? Really?
So there,
That's
The start.
there was
okay.
violence before the conflict, right?
There's a lot
Before
of
the
places
war.
you could start. It's really weird to start with the shelling of the Donbass. It's like, what happened in the months preceding the shelling of the Donbass? Was there perhaps
What
the murder over 100 protesters, the Heavenly 100? Was there possibly economic coercion and the stopping of trucks that were
Who
going
murdered
into
them?
Russia? The Yanukovych Berkut. Berkut murdered them. The Tutusky murdered them. The Special Police Force. The riot.
This is
police.
Maidan. The snipers in Maidan.
What
Is that
about
what
the
you're talking about?
snipers in Maidan? We're going to talk about this. We're going to go to the snipers. This is my favorite theory.
Why not?
It has the least basis if we're going to go into the
What do you mean has the least basis? They literally admitted to it. What are you talking about?
They admitted to what? What did they admit to?
The people who actually held the guns admitted that they were hired to kill people.
They admitted that, hey, we went out there and we shot protesters.
Yes.
We were right sector Azov guys and we killed them as a false flag. That's what they
don't
said.
remember if they were right sector Azov, but they were
Who were
hired to
they?
do that.
They were hired to do a false flag. They were.
You got me there, Dylan. You know more than I do.
Okay, got you. Anyway, it starts. I would think the more accurate starting point would be Euromaidan, not the shelling of the Donbass. Because what led to them? Why did they shell the Donbass? They shelled the Donbass because there was a rebellion in the Donbass. Where did the rebellion come from? It came from the fact that Yanukovych fled the country after protests against him were sparked by him pulling out of the association agreement, which he pledged he would enter into, lied about it, pulled out last second, enjoyed the Russian side because he failed for Russia's economic coercion of stopping Ukrainian trade. And then they protested
Donetsk and
against
Lugansk
him.
didn't declare autonomy?
The people who rebelled declared autonomy, yes. But does that mean that just because there's a rebellion that's what the vast majority of the people over there want?
Does that mean that they get to just shell civilian centers?
I don't think that means you get to shell civilian centers, but you do get to shell
Well,
rebels.
that's what they did.
That's what the Russians did. That's what the Ukrainians did. It was very sad, but that doesn't mean that's what the Donbass wants. That's what the people of the Donbass wants. They only ended up controlling 1/3 of the Donbass at any point up until the 2014 invasion. And all the polling data from the free parts of the Donbass seems to indicate that they didn't really want to be part of Russia. Support
What are
for
the free
Yanukovych.
parts?
The free parts, like the 2/3 that weren't controlled of it, but it wasn't controlled by the rebels. The Russian supported
So it's
rebels
okay for them
that shot
to
down
shell the
civilian
Donbass?
airliners. Yes, I do believe.
Oh,
that.
MH17 was shot down by Russians.
So if if Russia comes to help people, that's not okay. But if the U.S. is coming to help people, it's okay. Why is that okay?
Not even to help people, to send weapons. The U.S. comes to send weapons, that's cool. If Russia sends humanitarian aid, that's bad. They got to kill them.
Humanitarian aid and weapons are help because you use weapons to defeat an enemy. And if the enemy has invaded your country, you use them as a tool to get rid of them. Weapons can be seen as aid as an helpful
Didn't
tool.
Zelensky only today say that he didn't want to evacuate cities because then what would they be defending if not for civilians in the cities? He just admitted to using humans as people as human shields, right?
That's not what he admitted to. That's not what he admitted to, and that's a lie. You know
What did
that he was
Arizona
referring.
say?
Fucking how many questions went
In 2019.
What? Okay, he asked me a question. Do I answer his question? Do I answer your question? Whose question? Do
You
I
answer them all. Answer whatever you want.
Okay, so
Someone else can answer too.
Yeah, anyone. I mean, this is a whole big panel. It's just Dylan talking.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody
You
else?
keep asking him
jump in.
questions. I mean,
Yeah, here. Let's do this. Let's have
when
Dylan answer
Ginger
this
tried
question.
to talk, you interrupted her.
So Zelensky
Yeah, okay.
is referring to the economy of Ukraine needs to continue to function. They need to continue to have economic output. They need to continue to produce things and continue to have their factories run. Because if their economy doesn't function, then they cannot support a war effort. They cannot support the continuing of the struggle.
already aren't
It's the same
supporting a war.
reason why they need to. It's the same reason
We are.
why they. It's the same reason why they need to continue to replace these electrical grids and fix them is because if you don't have electricity, it's hard for your economy to function. It's hard for your people to function. You can't win a war.
It's
if
harder to
people
bomb
don't live.
civilians when you don't have electricity.
It's harder to get rid of the war criminal rapist Russians if they're in the country
Citation
fighting and
needed.
attacking. You
All right,
like,
let's have
citation of war crimes,
somebody.
Do I need to send more
Yeah,
documents? Like I can do that.
Yeah, let's have somebody online go. Somebody online. What do you think?
So back in the day, we had this whole thing where we started the United Nations, and we got all of these member states of the United Nations. And they all had to sign
Thanks,
these
Mugmug.
agreements when they wanted to become member nations in order to ensure that we wouldn't have another World War II, which the UN was formed to try to stop that thing from happening. The League of Nations completely failed at trying to do that. So when we got the UN and everybody joined, they had to promise, hey, I'm not going to invade the sovereign nation of another territory. And I hate to say it, Russia doesn't own Ukraine. I don't care if there was a referendum that took place in Ukraine. I don't care if all of the people that lived in that region voted to give that region to Russia. Unless the federal government of Ukraine votes to cut off a piece of their territory and give it to another country, it doesn't give that country the right to come and invade. I don't care what's going on in that territory. If the UN wants to send in troops to try to solve a local civil war problem, that's a UN solution. Russia has no right to come in there. And now that the UN is trying to step in on the opposite side and tell Russia to stop, they really need to stop because, again, They are the aggressors in this situation. They are bringing conflict to the region. They're trying to take territory that does not belong to them. And I don't think that it's defensible to say that they have any right to the land.
Tier 1 subscription.
I would say Russia has more of a right to their ancient capital than America does. Like if the Warsaw Pact started funding Nazis in a breakaway state of Maryland, right, and Washington D.C. became some kind of Soviet stronghold, right, we'd be looking at this pretty differently from our perspective.
So again, the Ukraine is a sovereign nation, and if
as
Ukraine,
of 30 years.
If Ukraine wants to make alliances with the rest of Europe, wants to make alliances with
Mexico doesn't have a choice if it wants to make an alliance with the Warsaw Pact.
Should or shouldn't
We have this thing called the Monroe Doctrine, where America controls everything that happens in this hemisphere.
That's their own business if they want to make alliances with these nations around them.
The reality is if there's a big guy in the
you
field,
got an issue where someone else is
deal with them.
talking and then you start talking over them. You keep doing it to Dylan, you keep doing it to me now too. So a sovereign nation has the right to make alliances with whoever they want. At no point does another nation have the right to come in and take that nation over, to take their sovereign territory and say, we don't like the actions that this government is taking.
Does a sovereign nation have a right to destroy its own civilians?
Or ban a language? You can't speak Russian here anymore.
What do you
Children
mean you
go to
can't
school
speak
anymore.
Russian? You can speak Russian.
There are criminal fines for speaking Russian.
No,
teachers have been seen asking their students, "What language do you speak at home?"
Okay, let me be clear. You can speak Russian in Ukraine. I saw many people speak Russian in Ukraine. I spoke a tiny bit of Russian in Ukraine. Most of the soldiers I met, most of the Ukrainian soldiers I met, were speaking Russian with their commanders.
It's almost like they're not even a country.
Why
are they all speaking Russian?
Why are the Irish speaking English? Those dirty potato farmers should go back to the crown because they're a fake Irish. Like, what the fuck?
Be easy on the Irish now.
What do you mean? Just because they speak a language does not mean that they swear loyalty to a nation state. That's
channels,
ridiculous.
homie, just so you know. I'm running 15 channels. I don't want to lose 6 of them immediately because you decide to use some racist terminology or whatever you're going to do.
I'm going to
get banned for going after the Irish. Yeah, I'm sure.
You knew what the rules were when we came in here, bro.
I didn't
I'm just saying. I don't use my channels.
I'm Irish American.
The Irish were oppressed. I'm also Irish American. I give him the pass, even if he was Irish.
I don't care if someone's race towards Irish. Who fuck cares? Sprout, go.
Too many fucking Irish.
If you are so concerned about ancient land that people feel they have a claim on, then I am extremely curious on what is your views on Israel's claim to its ancient land.
That claim is well over 2,000 years old. It's a lot older.
So you think Israel should maintain the entirety of what Israel?
No, of course not.
Wait, but why can't Israel claim its ancient land?
If Israel has a claim to Jerusalem, then Russia has a claim to Kiev, right?
That's literally his point.
I'm asking.
It's his point.
No, okay. So I mean, if you're trying to put that to me, then it should apply to you too, shouldn't it?
I'm asking you the question. I'm asking if you're going to stay consistent.
I personally don't agree with Israel's claim to Jerusalem.
So you're not going to stay consistent. Got it. Okay.
No, it's not. It's not an inconsistency thing. There's a difference in thousands of years. Do you understand that?
So can I interrupt you and just say, why can't we just have fucking open borders so we're not arguing about this? Because that seems to be what we're all arguing about is borders. Just open them.
One hegemonic global government to control them all.
The new world order.
Thank you for your perspective.
The new world order.
Thought about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, if instead of 1,000 years, let's dial it back like half a decade or maybe like a century, right? Let's does Kaliningrad belong to the Czech Republic?
I don't know.
No.
No? Why not?
I mean, I'm not even making Schlatsky's argument, so I don't want to speak for him, but I would say Kaliningrad belongs to Russia.
Why?
But it's not historically Russia, though, right?
No, I mean,
it was something else before.
There are consequences for losing a war. There are consequences for trying to exterminate a race of people and then losing that war. There are consequences, yes.
Yes, and then Russia's feeling the consequences of fighting their own war against Ukraine right now. They're feeling the consequences. The loss of men.
What, winning 4 regions?
What do you mean winning for? They just got pushed over the Donetsk River. Like what do you mean the Dnieper? They just pushed over the Dnieper River. They're not doing too well.
Why did that happen? Do you know why that happened?
Because they were
why? Well, no. Why did they move back? Do you know why they moved back?
They were unable to support their forces logistically.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What was going on with that dam? Do you know what the plans were for that dam from the Ukrainian side?
What were the plans with? Oh, it's because they're heroes and they care about the civilians. Yeah, I'm sure they.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Russians are historically caring about civilians. Yes.
No, they don't.
I'm glad you finally.
They have historically raped and murdered.
Russia literally saved the world from Nazis.
Wait.
That's because they care about
Dylan,
people.
please, Dylan. I know you've been talking.
The Soviet military raped and murdered Afghans like it was a video game, right? Millions died in the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which was mainly made up of Russian soldiers and Russian military traditions, which engaged in a campaign of scorched.
It sounds like Yankee has something to say.
Okay, let's hear it. Oh, sure. Okay.
Fake news. That's what he's thank you very much.
Thank you for the
so yeah, even Afghanistan. Let's see what other countries. It's the Czech Republic again. Poland
again.
You know,
the same
Hungary.
place again. We have 800 military bases around the world, but you just keep bringing up 2 examples of Russia, right?
Yeah, this is a stupid.
What about the rape of
American
Berlin? That was
body
pretty
count
bad,
is
don't you think?
significantly higher.
What about the rape
Not
of
even
Soviet women? Don't you think that was pretty bad?
They were
what
both
the fuck are you
bad.
talking about?
They were both bad. You're saying
can both be
the thing
bad.
is,
That's what
I'm not saying that, dude. You're the one making claims without sources.
Under
Claim,
American
by the way,
occupation.
you made the claim that the
Rocky.
Russian
I
military
said Kaliningrad belongs to Russia because they won the
you-
war.
you're
They
not-
stopped
you're-
Nazism.
You're completely on another planet right now. You said that the Russian military has a tradition of respecting and being nice to civilians, but there are many
More so than any other military that I know about.
Any other military?
Yeah. You think Americans didn't rape any Iraqi women?
Is America the only military?
Are you really? If you were to compare the Soviet invasion of
How many Vietnamese women, how many Japanese women have been raped and tortured by American soldiers? What the fuck are you talking about?
This is all just whataboutism.
Whataboutism. What about? You're doing the whataboutism.
You're trying to paint Russia as like an innocent person, like an innocent nation that's never done anything wrong.
You're painting Ukraine as an innocent
nation. Like a universal monster.
And it's
Like
not
everything
true that
they've
the
ever done
Russian
is
military
bad.
hasn't engaged in horrific atrocities. They have on multiple occasions. Rape has.
Did Bandera engage in horrific atrocities? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. The national hero of Ukraine engaged in atrocities.
So did many Russian national heroes, and so did many American national heroes.
Name one.
Name one. George Washington.
Russian heroes.
You want me to name? Okay.
Malevich.
Many Russian.
The last Russian czar who engaged in pogroms against the Jews.
Bro, you've been talking for a long time.
Okay, but
say
let
one
me just
thing.
one clear. Ask me one
What
question.
did the Soviet Union do with the Tsars?
What did they killed them, and then they engaged in mass deportations of Poles from their ancestral homes, Tatars. They engaged in horrific atrocities in Afghanistan. They tried to cover up the Chernobyl disaster, which spiked cancer rates and malformed babies that were being born in Ukraine. The Soviet Union.
There's no evidence of that.
There's no evidence that
for the Chernobyl thing, bro. Like less than
Really?
400 people died from Chernobyl. There's no evidence that any increased birth defects whatsoever.
100% there.
So the radiation spiked, and there's literally zero evidence of any increase in infants.
Soviet propaganda.
Bro, bring up a single source that shows me a single additional congenital birth defect.
It this time. I sourced everything. You sourced something this time.
You haven't sourced anything. What the fuck are you talking about?
I sourced the one
I think I can.
the 25,000 votes.
Okay, I need to step in. I need to step into this. Hold on a second. Hold on.
You referenced it. I don't see it.
You're a VIP of abolition. Go. And then I'm going to sprout.
Yeah. Okay. So as far as like
Oh no, what happened? Uh-oh. Can you guys still hear me? Can you guys still hear me? What happened? What happened there? I gotta disconnect from Discord and then reconnect again. Oh no! Fucking dude, I hate this computer. I need to get a new computer. Oh my god. Dude, this debate is terrible though. Let me just nobody has any clue what's going on. Okay, there we go.
That's called information literacy, dude. You fucking you go through everything.
Can I go for one
point? Real quick.
Can I make one point? Can I make one point first? Really quick.
Right, sure.
It's going to help you out, okay? 500 rapes every day in this country, in the United States, every day. There's 500 rapes here. So when you're going to start bringing up rape and shit, man, you better address it in the United States first before you start trying to blame the Russian army for
Why
rapes.
not both
They
at the
found
same time?
6 of them.
Why not at the same time?
Yeah, they're both bad.
Yeah, why not at the same time? Why
That doesn't
not
serve
have
anybody's interest when we say they're both bad.
Listen, we're in a conversation about Ukraine. Why not have the conversation about Ukrainian rapes during the Ukrainian conversation? If we're having a conversation about America, let's talk about the American rapes, right? Let's do that. Let's do that. Let's have those conversations. Tell me your schedule.
The rapes of the Romani people, the people that they tied up to trees with fucking saran wrap and shit.
Poles, right?
What about that? Yeah.
Poles like
Is that a thing or not a thing?
No, say it again. I'm sorry, my dog's barking.
Like the people in eastern Ukraine and the Romani people there, which are quote unquote gypsy people, they've been tied to trees and raped and beaten. And there's numerous video evidence of this happening.
That's because all Europeans are racist to Romanis.
Okay.
So
okay, but you just
does that happen in Russia?
You should focus on particular atrocities committed in this region of the world. So now we're mentioning one that was committed by Ukrainians, and you're saying, well, it's just all Europeans.
No, I'm not saying, well, it's just Europeans. I'm saying this is not something unique to Ukrainian culture.
Okay, but
let's just say Ukrainian racism and rape against the Romanis is not okay. Let's move forward. Let's talk about the actual war and
So
not
we should
something
send
that
them
doesn't
weapons
involve
then?
that. Yes, we should send them weapons to maintain their border as per the Budapest Memorandum.
At least I'm trying to get to a point here that when we discuss this, or really any issue in the world, and we start talking about a whole country and we say, well, historically they've done these atrocious things and there are these bad things they did in this conflict and therefore they're just bad and they're the bad guys and they're like Darth Vader, right? We have to stop them. That turns the world into this like binary kind of thinking where it's just like, no, we're the force for good and they're the force for bad. And it's just like a really immature way to look at world events. The fact is, America has committed atrocities. Every country has committed atrocities. No country is free of sin. It doesn't exist. So we can't go in and act like a police force where we're trying to somehow like morally cleanse huge swaths of the earth, because what we end up doing is going in and killing shitloads of people, fucking everything up, and then dipping out.
Like I said, per the Budapest Memorandum, we should be able to, or we should support Ukraine in defending its borders, per Budapest Memorandum, which was signed in 1994.
Yeah, like what you're saying is
signed by
ideal.
Ukraine, they agreed not to bomb the autonomous republics of Donetsk and Lugansk.
Yeah, and the Russian soldiers said they would leave, and they
got attacked.
I'll let you go. Let's let you go.
I'm literally trying to reply to non-smoker. Like let's slow down and just like go one at a time, right? We could do that. So, I forgot repeat the last thing you were saying. I don't remember.
Look, in essence, America and really no nation should be in a position where they're the moral arbiter.
Okay, yeah, what you're saying is very idealistic, and I agree with it in principle, but it's not how the world works. Because we've already done.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, we've already the things that America as like a monolith or whatever that has done in the past. It's already done it. We have to deal with it, and we're in the position that we're in now because we've done those things. I can criticize them, but I still have to accept that we're within the parameters of that reality, right? And I have to just deal with, the global homogeny is falling apart. It's no longer looking like America is in that position as strongly as it was 30, 40 years ago, right? We can all agree on that. And I would say it's a good thing for America to not be super police force. I agree with that principle. I think this is something that we've made commitments to already that we are going to follow through on, because if we don't, other countries can just start treating us like shit. And so on the way down for the hegemony, when we stop becoming like this like global military power, we're not just putting the people here into the worst possible position.
All right, I could get down with everything you said up until the last part. So in other words, and I could be misunderstanding you here, but what you're saying is that, well, we have a commitment here already, and if we don't, follow through on whatever, I'm not sure what exactly you're referring to, but if we don't follow through on our commitment to defend this country's sovereignty, then other countries are going to treat us like shit. But in this example, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like the treat like shit, right? Like that can be
You know, okay, so let me put it this way. You know how France got shitty with Vietnam and Australia because they entered it into the agreement? Like, shit like that. That's what I mean. Like, they could be shitty to us, right? Like, there's just plays that could be made outside America's participation, and we don't have to be participating there all the time. But maybe we would like other countries to be considerate to us when they make deals, right? Like, that's just a positive thing that helps global peace when people are considerate to their neighbors,
Burns
right?
is an immoral,
have a
corrupt,
question.
bankrupt
go on.
man.
I was just going to ask, like, how do you guys think that Europe feels right now that like the U.S. has kind of fucked them over via the Ukraine situation? Like, are they still going to be our allies? Because I
The
believe
European
that
Union has been sending weapons to Ukraine too. What are you talking about?
Dylan's not the only one that actually went to Europe to talk to Europeans.
I believe that Germany and France, I could be wrong, already stopped sending lethal aid to Ukraine because Germany's obviously fucked because of the Nord Stream, right? So what's Europe thinking? The U.S. is sold out.
They just sent anti-air. They just sent Panzerfaust and anti-air. They are continuing to send weapons. I mean, is it as large as the United States? No. German defense spending is much lower than the United States, but they are continuing to send aid to Ukraine, including lethal aid.
Isn't most of Western Europe on the side of Ukraine?
No, Germany.
No, most of Western Europe is in NATO. They don't really have a choice.
Well, I mean, we could say most of Middle Europe too, right?
Yes, I mean, so I mean, they had a choice to get in NATO. They also have a choice to leave NATO if they wanted to leave NATO. But the idea that almost the entirety of Europe, take out Belarus, take out a couple of nations, are not on Ukraine's side is asinine, and you're taking aside the facts. It's not just based on NATO.
What's going to happen because we fucked over Europe?
We didn't fuck over Europe. Europeans are doing this as well with us.
There's no energy crisis in Europe right now.
What's that, Yankee?
There's a worldwide energy crisis.
The thing is, there are European states.
Hold on, please. Alexa, why are you silencing Yankee Tanky?
No one can literally hear the guy. He's literally impossible to hear.
I think we need to give Yankee Tanky a turn.
I wish we could. I really do.
Okay, bring him back in.
We can't hear him. That's his mic. He talks. We can't hear him.
Free Yankee.
See, I told you the sanctions were working.
He's on speakerphone or something. We
Here, let's try again. Everyone, let's try again. Okay, we're gonna try for Yankee Tanky.
Yankee,
give us your take.
Yankee
wonderfully thought out. Wonderfully thought out.
This is the best he's ever
Fucking
done,
amazing.
to be honest.
This is great.
Only Dylan can argue like
Wait,
this.
oh, here he is. Everyone silent. Yankee Tanky, go.
Tell him to turn off his video.
Turn off noise suppression or something.
I like this guy already. He's not talking.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you hear me now without my video feed?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Like, at least you can hear me. I was trying to say, Italy, under the Meloni government, is now moving into the position where they are no longer funding Ukraine. They are no longer going to be sending weapons. This is the direction Europe is going to move into as they're going farther into this conflict, because the European people do not want this war. Regardless of whether they say they support Ukraine or they support Russia, they do not want this war, because this war means that their children go hungry. This war means that they can't afford to put on their gas. This war means that people are going to be impoverished and the economy is going to crash this winter. So there is a reason why Europe does not want to be in this position.
The only people that want this, the only people that want this war is Russia, though.
That's not true.
Maloney has repeatedly pledged. This is per Reuters on October 26th. Maloney has repeatedly pledged support to Kiev, while her coalition allies Silvio Berlusconi and Matteo Salvini have been much more ambivalent on the issue due to their historic ties with Russian president. So Maloney has repeatedly pledged support to Kiev, and I'm interested on what source you have, because this is October 26th by Reuters. So what source you have that shows that Italy is backing down from its support to Ukraine?
They stopped the funding of offensive weapons. So they are
Maloney
still
is
sitting
okay. Right
defense.
before that, it says Maloney said that while arms Italy supplies to Ukraine are not decisive for the outcome of the war, they are vital for Italy to maintain. Wait, you missed the second half of that sentence. It's always dangerous when you do that. It's always dangerous when you do that because you can stop at the comma if you want to.
Don't charge defensive weapons.
It says they are vital for. Okay.
There it goes.
We'll stop
Don't
at the
you
comma.
dare
We'll
fucking-
stop at the
Don't
comma.
you dare interrupt the Yankee Tanky, all right?
We'll stop the comma.
Listen, it's hard enough to hear you as it is. When you yell, we can't understand you at all.
This is why I invited him on.
This is why you invited him on.
This
This is the
isn't-
only
this-
reason
this
anyone
is
invites him on.
He's tailor-made for this.
This doesn't understand. His
hold on.
was working earlier.
Defensive weapons that Italy is sending, and soon enough, Italy won't be sending defensive weapons either, because the Italian people do not want this war. They do not want to starve. They don't care if it's for Russia or if it's for.
So the problem
it's
is.
not it's about the fact that this war is putting the Italian people in poverty. And we're going
Just
to
let
see
them
the same
finish.
thing- We're going to see the same thing in Finland, and we're going to see the same thing in all these countries that are either joining the EU or joining NATO or have been a part of NATO historically. We are going to see every one of these countries. Why do you think in the Netherlands you had these farmers rising against the eco bullshit that was being pushed by the government in the Netherlands? It's because people are sick and tired of the governments forcing them into wars, forcing them to starve out their own people. That is what they're sick of. That is what they're tired of. And that is why Europe is.
Preach, brother.
Where's
Okay,
your
so
source?
that would be really interesting if it wasn't for the fact that Maloney on the campaign trail specifically promised to send weapons to Ukraine because she was afraid that an
Biden promised a bunch of shit too.
Let Dylan talk. Hey, let Dylan go.
I let the clown do his dance. Can I not? Look at him.
Seriously.
Dude, let the man with the long hair talk, please.
So Maloney on the campaign trail specifically promised to continue to support Ukraine with aid and weapons and stuff like that. And the reason why she did that was because the majority of Italians still support Ukraine, and people were concerned that due to her ties with people who have associations with the Russian right wing, that she might decide not to send over weapons, might decide not to send out over guns and stuff like that. And so on the campaign trail, she made a point of declaring that she was supportive of Ukraine and she was going to support them aid. So you cannot use the fact that Maloney's government is moving in this new direction as evidence that the Italian people don't support Ukraine or don't want to send them weapons, when she specifically changed her campaign to make herself look more pro-Ukraine in an attempt to get votes.
Dylan, what do you?
Regardless of what Maloney is saying, the Italian people are not for this war. It doesn't matter
That's
whether
not what
they
the polling
think Ukraine
suggests.
is the country to support or they think Russia is the country to support. They just do not want to go into this war.
Hey, Yankee Tanky, I have a question.
Wait,
for you
Dylan,
real
do you
quick.
got like?
Hold on.
Come on,
Yankee
abolition.
Tanky,
You've been talking this whole fucking time. Talking about Yankee.
No, I know. Yankee Tanky, can you hear me?
People in Hungary don't want to go into this.
Holy shit.
Sounds like an angry robot.
Yankee Tanky. Abolition wants to ask you a question, Yankee Tanky.
Listen up.
Hey, Yankee, I assume you're still yelling, but I have a question for you. Do you think you could become president?
Key? The guy in the bunker?
The Yankee Tanky? Yeah. Do you think you could become president?
We're looking into the United States. You American people are slowly moving towards moving against this war. It doesn't matter whether the people's
Holy fuck. He didn't stop yelling. He didn't stop yelling.
Nothing else.
He didn't stop yelling. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Hold up. So look, this is per NPR. Polls show fewer than 40% of Italians approve their country supplying weapons to Ukraine. What do you make of that, Dylan?
What's the other percentage for the people who are against sending weapons?
Pulling up the data now. Give me 1 second.
Because
I literally just
I would
Googled
suggest
it. I had no idea.
I would suggest it was still a plurality, wouldn't it? There's a few instances where countries, the majorities are majorities, but there's a few countries in Europe where it's just pluralities, where it's like 36 against, 40% for, and the middle ground.
It's fewer than 40% approve of their country supplying weapons in Italy.
Well, that's not answering
So
my
it's a
question.
plurality
But
against.
I have a follow-up question because it could still be a plurality. is like the percentage against sending aid 41%? Or what's the percentage against it?
He said less than 40.
Okay, so
less than 40%.
Okay, so that would mean that a plurality of Italians still support sending weapons.
Is
to
against sending weapons to Ukraine.
No, less than.
If the number is 40%, that's in favor of sending, and the number against it is under 40%, then it's the plurality still in favor.
Other way around.
The other way around. So what's the percentage?
No, it's not the other way around. You misread that, Schlatsky.
Wait, what? No, Schlatsky has it right. It's less than 40%.
Okay, then what'd you say to begin with? Say what you said to begin with.
Dude, less than 40% of Italians support sending weapons to Ukraine.
Okay, so what percentage of Italians are saying we're against sending weapons? Like we're not
I'm trying to pull
because
up.
there's a neutral middle ground in these issues always.
No, I understand.
So that's why I'm suggesting it might be a plurality.
I understand. I'm just trying to clarify because I thought there might have been some wires crossed.
Even if it isn't a plurality, which I would assume it is, the majority of Europeans are still in favor, and the majority of European countries are still in favor of supporting Ukraine through this conflict. There can be outliers. There can be outliers, of course, but the majority of Europeans side with Ukraine. That's not even like a debatable question.
Can I ask a question, please? May I please ask a question? Okay, it's not related to what you guys are currently talking about, but I do want to ask the people who are supportive of Ukraine, what do you make of Arestovich, who is the advisor to Zelensky, saying the national idea of Ukraine, one of the central ideas is to lie as much as possible to ourselves and others? What do you make of that?
What was this in reference to? That's like a very, like, I have no clue what to take from that. Like, is he just saying we should lie, lying is good? Like what was the context of that quote? Like, that could mean a million different things.
So you haven't seen it?
No, I haven't seen this 2019 we should lie, lying is a good quote. No, I have not seen it.
So
Dylan, you don't know anything.
According to EU opinions,
no, what was wait. What was the context of the quote? You just brought it up like it was a bad thing. What's the context of the quote?
I'm gonna send it to you. So
okay,
Dylan, do you want to know that?
Can you tell me it though?
Do you want more info on the poll I mentioned before?
I think her point is that anybody that would say anything so terrible is inherently a bad person, isn't it?
No,
obvious?
I'm just confused as to I don't even know what the quote means.
Why would they say?
Well, no one knows what it
I don't think he was
means.
very clear what he was saying.
But no, she brought it up.
In general,
so I'm
that
just
they
why
have
the
to
fuck
lie.
I
have the numbers.
God damn it.
Okay.
I just wanted to know what people who were supportive of Ukraine make of the.
Well, I don't know what it means. What's the what? You don't even know the context of it. Like, well, you brought it up. What's the context?
Does it?
He was talking about the national identity of Ukraine and how they have to keep lying in order to maintain international support something along those lines. It was pretty vague. I'll grant you that, but he was speaking in generalities.
Okay,
Anyway, back to non-smoker.
Okay,
yeah,
I would have to see the quote because it just seems like it's very out of context. Purpose.
It's a video interview.
Let me
It's
read
a
the
video.
goddamn fucking poll.
Okay, let's go to the polls. All right,
I got the
non-smoker.
receipts. Thank you.
Oh.
So it's actually a binary question. It's just yes or no. And should the EU support Ukraine by delivering weapons? 58% of Italians say no. Should their own government support Ukraine by sending weapons? 61% of Italians polled said no.
Okay, so it looks like they're moving towards humanitarian aid. The majority of them.
Yankee was right.
So according to
let me be clear.
1 second.
The majority of Italians support Ukraine. They just don't agree on how they should support Ukraine. Majority of Europeans still want to send weapons.
I want to support Ukraine with humanitarian aid. I want to send lots of bandages. I want to send lots of food.
And a lot of rockets, a lot of machine guns.
Fuck rockets, fuck machine guns, no military, no lethal aid.
1 second.
Send a
1 second. 1 second. All right, thank you. Non-smoker. So you brought up a poll, and you brought up your numbers. I have it's a EU opinions poll, and it's by Bertelsmann Stiftung. It was used in a article in November 10, 2022, by NPR. This poll, it says, when asked about measures in support of Ukraine, Europeans generally support delivering weapons to Ukraine, 60%, welcoming Ukrainian refugees, 81%, and welcoming Ukraine into the European Union at 66%.
Yeah, dude, you're reading the same poll as me.
Okay. So point out
the weapons questions at the bottom.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. I appreciate that.
If you do Control F, you go to find, just look up weapons or Italy.
Okay, appreciate that.
Okay. But you guys also acknowledge the majority of Europeans still want to continue to send lethal aid, right?
Well, based on this,
do.
it's a narrow majority want to continue sending weapons. It's something like I think 54% in all of Europe.
And it depends. And you want to know
What's
what's
China's
interesting
position?
about? I don't know. They're not too involved in the conflict.
I
But
think there's more people in China than there are in Europe.
Okay, but
What
they're
about
not
people in the
but
world
they're
are
not the,
like,
but
don't
okay.
support.
The thing is, the Chinese aren't the ones dying, right? And they're not the
The
ones.
Europeans aren't the ones dying, right?
Europeans are the
talking
ones
about
dying.
support
Actually,
from
yeah.
other
No,
people.
Ukrainians are dying. They're not Europeans.
Well, some
They're
of
not
them
in
are.
the EU.
Some of them are Europeans, though. A lot of them are Foreign Legion guys or aid workers that are dying.
Is
You
that
have to
right?
be in the EU.
Or a lot
So
of
I
them are
hope as
also-
many of those
and they're
guys
also-
die as
and all-
possible.
and all
Fuck
these-
them.
Oh, you want as
Foreign
many-
Legion? Fuck
Wait,
them.
you want the aid workers to die?
I want the Foreign Legion to die. I
they're
didn't say anything
great
about aid
guys.
workers.
I wish them all a steady hand and good aim against the Russian
I hope
invasion.
the Foreign Legion gets wiped off the face of the earth. That's
Hey,
what I
we're
want.
getting to the line. Whoa, chill.
Oh my
Hey,
God.
hey,
Real easy, real easy
Hey,
from your
hey,
comfortable
hey.
home to rail against. Oh, go die, go die. It's real easy from the comfort of your home to do that.
Absolute child.
We had this
Okay,
conversation prior to the debate that we're
Yeah.
not going to do death threats.
Do not call for death. I'm going to give you one more chance, Lasky. Okay? There's
Absolute
only chance.
fucking child.
Apologize anyway.
Either way, the majority of Ukrainians want the weapons, obviously, because they want to fight against the invasion. And so, if somebody decides they want to give somebody a tool against an invader, I think that's completely their right. I don't see anybody complaining about how the Soviet Union sent the Viet Cong guns. I don't see anybody complaining about all of the liberation struggles the Soviet Union funded in Africa against European colonialism. But immediately when we supply a liberation struggle against a Russian invasion, which has shown itself to fill up mass graves, commit horrific war crimes, and deny the Ukrainian even right to exist, the idea that their culture is independent,
That's not
language
true.
independent. Dmitry Medvedev said Ukraine is a disease of the mind. Former president of Russia, one of the Putin's right-hand
Maybe as a national identity,
Putin
but
said
not
that
as a language
it's
and
an
not as a
artificial
culture.
state created by Lenin, even though multiple Ukrainian states existed beforehand, and even Voltaire wrote about the existence of the Ukrainian
Wow,
people
Voltaire,
and their
shit.
and their desire for it to be
All right,
independent. I'm
but
saying that there's a
Dylan,
historical
Dylan,
legacy,
wait.
a historical
Can I
struggle
just talk to you
there.
about the Voltaire thing? You do realize the context of that Voltaire quote, right?
What's the context of the Voltaire quote?
So that's Voltaire's history of a Swedish king who was making a conquest into Eastern Europe. And the entire premise of that book is basically, first of all, you should know Voltaire never visited he never went further east in Europe past Germany.
Okay.
He wrote the whole thing as like a secondhand account of a travel history. And the entire book, if you read it, basically describes not only Russians, but Ukrainians as like primitive, savage people. And the whole idea is this Enlightenment assertion of like Western Europe being like this center of civilization, and then the East being this like dark, you know, unresearched or unknown land with these primitive people. Like the whole thing is not. I understand the quote you're taking out of like, oh yeah, the Ukrainians always wanted independence. That section is about where Peter the Great won his greatest victory against the Swedish king and sort of repelled him. So it's kind of like, it's not the best source for like trying to support Ukrainian independence.
What
or, like,
I'm
glory to
saying is
Ukrainians
that
or
there's a
anything like that.
historical Ukrainian legacy, language, culture, and this idea of Ukraine.
No one argued against that.
Isn't this idea? I'm not saying anybody argued against it. I'm creating a narrative, right? An evil narrative here. And there's this identity that is created. It is in the world, and that they want to go their own way, and it's pretty clear they want to go their own way. And I'm perfectly happy, just like I would be happy with the Soviet Union funding African independence struggles. I'm perfectly happy with the United States funding a Ukrainian independence struggle against a neighbor which is invading to blatantly annex territory that doesn't want to be a part of it.
You're speaking for all Ukrainians again, and it's pretty clear that all of Ukrainians want to go their own way.
The polling data is clear on this, okay?
The polling data is subject to polling bias, and you understand that.
You're speaking about Eastern Ukrainians, like you.
No,
know
I'm
what the Eastern
I'm saying
Ukrainians want.
yeah.
You say, oh,
I'm
look
saying
at these,
not all of
look
them.
at these referendums.
Yeah,
Like, hey,
some
these
of them do, and some of them don't.
Some of them, the majority don't want to be part of Russia, and there's no data that can reflect that the majority of Eastern Ukrainians want to be part of Russia. There's no data.
Except for the people that actually became Russian citizens willingly, right?
Of course, there's some people. There's some people, and I'm sure the United States, if Mexico invaded Texas,
The
that would
exception
decide
does
I would
not
like to
make
be
the
a
rule.
Mexican citizen.
But the exception doesn't make the rule.
Okay, so just if they don't want to be part of Russia, then don't make them be part of Russia.
Yeah,
But if
they
wanna
can
be
leave.
part of
They can
Russia-
leave.
Yes, And you said, as you
Yeah,
said,
Donbass left
They can
Ukraine.
pick up and they can leave and they
They
can go join the
exercised-
Moscovite in Moscow. Exactly.
They
can get out of
exercise
there.
their UN Article 1 ability right for self-determination. That's
No,
right.
That's
they left
not.
Ukraine.
They didn't exercise that. Okay. What do you mean
didn't?
They exercised it. How did they show that? Well, from what legitimacy does the government in the Donbass and Donetsk and Luhansk derive?
Well, there's a
itself?
referendum that
from
you don't recognize, of
referendums
course.
that is not recognized, and no one recognizes
Yeah,
it.
you
no
don't
one
recognize
respectable recognizes it. No knowledgeable election monitor is going to say, yeah, that was conducted fair and independently.
You're all
Most
about the
people-
agency of Ukrainians as long as they're not from Donbass.
I'm
That's fine.
all about the agency of Ukrainians as long as it's provable that they're acting in their agency. There's no evidence that that referendum
Yeah, the people
was
who
legitimate.
voluntarily got Russian passports and voted to join Russia.
Of course, there are people
showing
who support
this.
any occupation force. There were French fascist collaborators. They exist everywhere in Alsace-Lorraine. That does not mean that the majority of Ukrainians want to be part of Russia. There's no evidence to reflect that.
How many Ukrainians collaborated with Nazis, bro?
Take anyways. It's
I'm
just
sure
a
a
crap
decent
take
amount.
anyways,
Yes,
because-
and but
Let's
the
say
thing is, the
somebody-
majority of Ukrainians died fighting against the German invasion. More Ukrainians died in World War II than Russians.
Okay, Ginger, go.
It's a crap take anyways because
They're not. See,
because
there it
let's
is.
say-
He denies
Hey,
your.
go on, go on.
He denies their.
Let Ginger go.
No,
Let
wait,
Ginger
no.
go.
He
Just
tried
let
to
the
slip that
fucking
in there.
girl
No,
talk.
I'm not gonna let the girl talk. I'm sexist. I'm sexist. I need to. Just very
I knew it.
quickly. Very quickly.
I'm sorry,
Did
Dylan.
you not-
Ginger, go.
Look at him.
I'm saying it's just an idiotic take anyways because you're saying, oh well, they've done this, they've done that to the Donbass, whatever. Okay, so let's say hypothetically something happens to where somebody's bombing Germany or whatever, and we're not going to send fucking troops in there because of what happened with fucking World War II. Like it's an absurd fucking take to be like, oh well, because they've done this, they don't deserve help. Like
no, but it's still happening.
I'll just say the difference is in
nobody's
historical
denying
versus
that
currently.
it happened though.
Yeah, no.
Nobody's
I'm not
denying that it happened.
Right. The difference
Nobody's
is that Germany did stuff
denying
in
that
the
it's
past.
happening.
What's currently happening is cluster munitions are being dropped on civilians in Donbass. That's happening today, currently, or within like the past couple months.
The majority of
There's
cluster
documented
munitions
cases,
dropped
proven
in
cases.
Ukraine have been
that's a
dropped
war
by the
crime
Russian
to target
government.
civilian centers. That's a war crime.
Why are
And
you
that's
so
being committed
outraged?
by Ukrainian
Why are you
armed
so
forces.
outraged when Ukraine does it, but not outraged
Hold
at all
on,
when the
Dylan.
Russians
Hold
do it?
on,
Just because
Dylan.
you don't view the
Well, if you
Ukrainians
could show
as
me a
independent
case of
people?
Russians targeting civilians, then I would be outraged about
I
it.
can show you footage that I took myself.
This is
doing it.
mansplaining to a T.
I don't care. Shut the fuck up. What the fuck are you even contributing?
Dude, because
What do you, okay,
so-
can we address the thing he said earlier that he just snidely like dropped there and wanted to kind of like he said that you said that there is no Ukraine. There is no
Holy
Ukrainian
shit.
identity. There is no Ukrainian.
I said Ukrainians are Russians. When they were fighting in
Ukrainians
World War
are
II, they were fighting as Soviet
Nobody
soldiers.
is wondering
What do you
your
mean? Wait,
opinion
so
is.
the
Texans
Soviet
are
Union-
Americans.
the
You don't say that Texas is not America. Texas
Actually,
is
I
part of
fucking do,
America.
you
During the
little bitch.
Soviet Union, there
I
was a
fucking do, you little
Ukrainian.
bitch. Texas is Texas. Get the fuck out of
Right,
Texas.
of course.
So do you
yeah.
recognize that Ukrainians are their own separate cultural identity, who have a right to self-determination and a
Yeah,
right
so
to
do
live their own ways?
Eskimos. There's 185 nationalities within Russia that are all protected ethnicities, and their language is
Do you
protected.
believe
They
that
actually
Ukraine should be a
saved
part of the
languages.
Russian
That's
Federation? that they
Russian.
should
Holy
surrender
shit,
and
this
just
dude is
become
a
part of
Russian
Russia?
op,
You just,
bro.
He just unironically just
Russian
wants
op,
Russia
bro.
to take over as the imperial empire,
Russian,
conquering all the
that's it.
former
He's
people.
Russian.
You know the Poles.
Now make
I'm
The
not talking about
Poles.
an imperial empire.
You know,
I'm
maybe
talking about protecting people within their
Poland
borders.
needs to come back within the Russian
Don't
Volk.
work for the State
You know?
Department.
Like just come
Ukraine,
right back. What do you mean he
Bandera
works for
worked
the State
really hard
Department?
to
You're just
murder
saying
Jewish
bullshit.
people and Polish people.
What?
Right?
Why?
And
why?
Russia doesn't
why
do
is this,
that.
I would
what do
like
you mean?
to recognize
Wait,
Black
Russia
Yamada.
doesn't murder Jewish people? Are you kidding me? The Russian Empire fucking slaughtered Jews in pogroms.
Okay,
What are
we're
you
going
talking
back
about?
beyond the Soviet Union. That's over 100 years ago.
Ukrainian.
What do you mean?
yeah.
That doesn't matter.
I told you. I
Wait,
told
the
you what the
fucking
Soviets
Banderas
did with
80
the
years
Romanovs,
ago.
right?
Hey, what happened?
Wait,
what
listen
happened
to him.
to-
Wait, no, stop. He says,
Lvov
hey,
used to be a Jewish
he
city.
says Russia, Russia, that's 100 years ago, that's too far. Bandera 80 years ago, that's basically modern history. That's different. 100 years ago,
Because
too
they
old.
currently have statues to Bandera. No one has a statue for Romanov. They're not
They have-
praying to Romanov
they-
for how
they
he
have-
killed Jewish
wait,
people.
they
They're
do
praying
honor
to,
the Romanovs. They
Bandera
reburied
because he
his
killed
family. The
Jewish
Russian
people and
government-
Polish people. They
the
love
Russian
him for
government-
that.
The Russian
He's a
government
national champion.
They reburied his family. They gave him a
Okay.
fucking full funeral. They were honoring the Romanovs.
And
They
Bandera is
do.
buried in Berlin. So what?
So what I'm trying to get at is all nations have like these monuments to horrific leaders in their past and people they idealize whether they like
In
it or
America,
not.
we took
But
down
none of
statues
Germany?
to Robert E.
Oh,
Lee.
didn't we have the fucking
statues of
Confederate
George
statues?
Washington.
Like,
we still have
didn't
statues
we
of
have-
Robert E. Lee. We still have
Yeah,
them.
like we still
We
have
have some.
fucking.
We took down other ones.
I mean, yeah, like in other states like Maryland and shit. But yeah, we still had them. We still have schools named after like Robert E. Lee and shit. Come on now.
That's bad.
And why
How
should
many
we
Nazi
stop at
monuments are in
Ukraine? From
Germany?
what I understand, Russia has claims to parts of Poland too.
Poland,
Clearly
yeah,
they own
Estonia,
all of
Latvia,
that. We should
Lithuania,
get into
Romania,
Czechoslovakia. Why
Moldova,
is this war larger
Kazakhstan?
than what it is now? I'm sure that nobody
Because
wants
Poland
to
and
defend these
Czechoslovakia
territories
aren't dropping
has a right
bombs
to
on
their
Russian
land?
people.
They
They
aren't
weren't
dropping bombs on Russian bombs to people.
either.
They're
It was
Ukrainian
never
people.
happening.
In East
Ukrainians
Ukraine, they
are
were.
dropping bombs on the Donbass.
Yeah, so are the Russians.
Ukraine
They're
did not
dropping more
attack
bombs on the
Russia.
Donbass than the
Well,
Ukrainians
Russia
They were
are.
attacked
attacking
Ukraine.
Russians in eastern Ukraine.
The Russian government has killed more Russian speakers in Ukraine than Bandera could have ever dreamed of.
Bullshit.
They absolutely have. Look at their bombing
Absolute
campaign.
bullshit.
Look at the city of Mariupol. Has a very high Russian-speaking population. Even to the
The
Russian
city of
government's
Mariupol's
own-
been rebuilt by
even-
Russia already.
They haven't rebuilt it.
Ukraine's had it for 30 years and they couldn't be bothered to build a hospital there. Russia's already providing medical and humanitarian aid to those people.
Those people still
They
don't have
are.
electricity. Many of them still don't have clean water. 60% of the buildings,
Bro,
according to
they
the Russian
literally
government's own
granted
numbers,
Crimea
60%
access to
of
clean
those
water for the
buildings
first
are
time
not
in 8
inhabitable.
years.
They flattened the city like they did Grozny. They leveled it.
Grozny's doing great, and so is Mariupol right now.
Grozny
They're doing
is
a lot
very-
better after
Do you
they've
guys
been
believe what they're
granted
They treated
the
Grozny like shit.
resources
They fucking took
from the Russian
Chechen
Federation.
civilians, shot them on the wall. They fucking flattened Grozny. What do you mean it's doing great under Katarov?
Look at
that
it.
fucking butcher? The
I don't
fucking
know where this
butcher
guy
who
gets
fucking
off speaking
executes
for everybody in
homosexuals?
Mariupol.
Dylan, you're going back to Ukraine. Can you
I-
go there
I
and
don't-
check it out? Will you
What-
check it out for us, please? When you go back to Ukraine, can you please check it out for us? Prove us wrong.
You want
I
me to
think you
enter
can.
Russian-occupied territory to show you that the city is still damaged? You can just look at footage.
We'll wait,
posted by
Dylan.
Russian
We'll
military.
wait.
Like,
You just look at public
can't you just go on
Russian
fucking
media.
Google Maps? Can't you just go on Google Maps and fucking find it or something? Why you got?
Look
Why
at
you have?
satellite images of the city still destroyed?
Google Maps is like 1 or 2 years out of date.
We're not talking about
Doubt
Google
Maps
Maps,
even
though.
has any destruction visible.
Look,
but it's
the
all been
Russian
rebuilt by
government's
Russia at this
bombing
point.
campaign. Even the Russian government admits they fired
They
a
use-
lot more artillery shells than the Ukrainians
say
are.
no.
They're dropping many
And what's
more
the difference
bombs,
in accuracy?
many more missiles. The Russians are not terribly accurate. I've seen it firsthand, and we've seen it in
Less
many
accurate than
reports.
Ukrainian?
I've seen them just pepper city centers, just full of civilians midday during rush hour. No army men, no soldiers in sight. Like they do engage in this behavior. They engage in the deliberate targeting of civilians.
Yeah, we totally believe.
Tell me that Ukraine doesn't.
What there is no, you know what? There are probably instances I can find where Ukraine has committed war crimes, but the scale of atrocities.
So
are
that
not
makes
even
America a
comparable.
state sponsor of terrorism.
Well, we would be a state sponsor of terrorism when we supported the Soviet Union against the Nazis because they engaged in horrible atrocities during the pushback. But the thing is, the Soviet Union was better than the Nazis.
Are you saying that the Soviet Union terrorized the Nazis?
I can't
No
even
one
hear
said
what
that.
you're saying, Yankee. I can't.
I
didn't
think
hear
I
that
heard it.
question.
Nobody said what you think they
Hey.
said.
That the Soviet Union was a terror state terrorizing the Nazis in Germany.
No one said that.
You're not listening to me. They engaged in acts of terror during the Second World War. But the problem is the Nazis were
America.
worse. The Nazis invaded them, and we were correct to support the Soviet Union in the struggle against the Nazis, even if they did atrocities like the rape of Berlin, which we talked about earlier. Like we
Things that
bombed
didn't
Dresden,
happen.
we still should have fought the Germans.
Well,
That was
that
one
I
shot.
agree with.
Speaking of which,
The Soviets actually told us to bomb Dresden. They were the ones who wanted us to do it.
Were terrorized by Soviet Union. That sounds like what you're backtracking from saying.
What? No, the Soviet Union did commit war crimes and atrocities and terrorize people during their march towards Berlin. They did, but I don't think it's comparable to what the Nazis did. But they did do atrocities. They did
Right.
horrific shit.
Well, you just said it's not comparable to what the Nazis did.
Yes, but
Right.
my point
I'm not-
is my
That's kind of the
point.
point.
Yeah,
We're not
and what-
responsible for
exactly.
individual soldiers'
What-
actions. The plan
exactly.
of Germany was
Exactly.
to wipe out Slavic people.
Exactly.
And take their country and take their
Ukraine,
territory
what
for
they're doing
Germany.
is not
Ukrainians
comparable
and
to what the
Russians are
Russians are doing. That's
together.
my point. What the Ukrainians are doing is not comparable to what the Russians are doing. It's on a totally different scale, on a totally different amount. All the fighting is going on in Ukraine. It isn't that crazy to think the majority of
You
these
just
civilians
got it
dying is because of the
very
Russians.
close, just
They're
backwards.
invading. They're invading. They're bombing. There's no international monitor that's going to tell you the majority of civilians came from Ukrainian shelling in this war. It's just not true. There's not even enough Ukrainian shelling for that to be the case because Ukrainian shells, they're firing like one shell for every 4 or 5 the Russians fire. The Russians are not that terribly accurate. I've seen it firsthand. They bomb and pepper city centers with no concern for civilian casualties. They did it in Mariupol. They did it in Mykolaiv. They did it in many locations.
So they're not
Sprout,
using the local aid.
I would like to hold on. I'd like to hear from Sprout. Sprout hasn't got much time. Let Sprout go.
I mean, I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with like a lot of what Dylan said, is that Ukraine has committed atrocities. Yes, anyone that's committed a war crime should be tried for that war crime and punished for that war crime. But at the same time, it's not comparable to what Russia is doing. And to say that it is comparable to what Russia is doing is just blindly looking at scenario or ignoring facts. So when we take a look at this, you see one obvious person who is the aggregator in this situation. Not saying that Ukraine hasn't made mistakes. Not saying Ukraine hasn't done atrocious acts in trying to defend its own borders. But we are right to support Ukraine in defending their borders from Russia because of the vastly different level of atrocities.
What alliance do we share with you as America?
The Budapest Memorandum is what I'm going off. I never said we shared an alliance with Ukraine.
Okay, so why do we have a responsibility to defend Ukraine if we don't have
the
even share an
Budapest
alliance
Memorandum?
with them? Okay, well, what about the Minsk Accord? If you're going to talk about Budapest, Ukraine agreed not to bomb their own people. Do you think there are no?
If you shit out on one treaty, do you get to break any other of your treaties just because?
What about the treaty that's more recent?
Does it matter?
Does it matter?
No.
Okay, so it doesn't matter.
Thank you.
So no
You're the one who
countries-
said it, so they're not agreeing to Minsk, so they get the shit taken from them.
Neither did the Russians. They didn't agree to Minsk either. They
Russia had no
They didn't remove any of their
terms
soldiers.
in
They didn't
Minsk.
do any of it. They
Russia
didn't do
had
any of what
zero
they were
terms in the
supposed
Minsk. Have you read the Minsk Accord? They have zero
to do. I
terms.
read it. They didn't
according- in
follow
Minsk.
it. They didn't follow it.
There's nothing Russia had to follow. Russia was not a part of the Minsk Accords. They signed it as
Not
an
to
observer.
mention, the thing is about the Minsk Accords is you put a gun to somebody's head and you ask them to give you their wallet. At the end of the day, those agreements were written under extremely
You
aggressive terms.
sign an agreement saying that we promise we will not bomb our own civilians, and then you break that agreement. What do you think should happen to you?
What do you mean? They bomb civilians as well. They bomb civilians as well. They're bombing
Not
more
even
civilians
close.
than the Ukrainians
We were
ever
just
did.
talking about
If you're-
like the
if you're
scale of
concerned-
rape and the scale of crimes. Not even close to comparable. 8,000 civilian casualties were on the Donbass side of that conflict for the past 8 years.
There was 13,000 casualties overall, military
Total.
civilian
That's
included.
including military
Yes,
deaths.
Yeah, I just
What
said that.
Russia's
If you
saying
would have
is
let me
true,
finish the
and
sentence.
Ukraine.
The balance of
but the
civilian
Donbass
casualties are on the
people-
Donbass side.
Okay,
That's not
and
arguable.
then Russia's solution is kill more civilians. Invade
No, Russia's
Ukraine,
solution is to denazify
bomb their-
Ukraine.
And they failed. They don't care about Nazis. They don't.
No,
They actually do.
If they
But
did,
you
they wouldn't have
can't- but
hired
you can't
Rusic, a
have it-
neo-Nazi paramilitary organization, to do the fighting around Kherson. What? You're gonna have Nazis denazify Nazis? It's fucking ridiculous.
Bro, Ukraine has Nazis fighting for Ukrainian independence. You can't use that argument.
The Russians
you
hired
can't have
Nazis to fight their war in Ukraine. They
Yeah,
did.
the Russian hired Nazis to fight other Nazis. So when they both die, it's the Nazis who are dying. Oh
So
my
they're
God, what a
giving Nazis
tragedy.
guns. Wait. You do realize if your argument is why do you think
Bro,
Nazis
you're realizing
Wait,
that you're arguing for Ukrainian Nazis.
You don't
You're saying, oh,
understand.
Russians use Nazis, but
I am
Azov is
arguing
totally
for an
cool. Right
independent
sector,
state.
that's
I
totally
am-
cool.
wait,
They're
wait,
fighting
wait.
for independence.
The difference. Wait, let me be
Wait,
clear.
so
Your-
wait.
your-
So the Russian
your
Nazis are
thing is,
better than
I
the
don't-
Ukrainian
this- I
Nazis.
don't think this war has anything to do with Nazism at all. The Russians do. They believe it has something to do with Nazism. They're saying that they're denazifying the country. You do not use Nazis to denazify Nazis. Definitely, if you're
Why not?
concerned with Azov,
Why not?
Because
You use them in the front line. Do you know what a Strafbat is?
The reason why is because if you're
Conscript,
their
convict
problem-
battalion.
their problem
You use the people who are criminals first in the most dangerous missions. Why not?
Let me ask you a question, and let me talk over you while you're trying to answer this question. That way you're not capable of answering the question, because the only point that I'm trying to make are the points that I'm trying to make.
Oh my
Dylan,
God,
you're
go ahead.
trying to
Please
say
argue.
that Ukraine bombed civilians when they didn't.
They
The
did.
thing that started this conflict.
They literally did.
Russia,
They 100%.
so Russia
That's not even a question.
I'm not
Bro,
getting
I
into
just-
the Nazi
Ukraine-
shit. Oh my God.
It's a response, not an aggression. It's not even
I
a
just
question.
heard this man say
Russia-
it doesn't matter
Aggressed
if
against Ukraine.
Russia have Nazis or
And so
not.
Ukraine
Queen
aggressed
Alexa, what
against
are you
Russian
doing?
No one can hear
civilians.
each other. We're all
Ethnic
just
Russians
yelling
in
and no one
Ukraine.
can hear a damn thing.
That's
None of
because
us can
this
hear
moron
anything. The whole
doesn't know how to
point.
take his turn.
That's the
Okay.
whole point.
So the thing
Can
is,
I-
the reason why you don't like Azov, I assume, or
What?
Right Sector, or any of these far right militias, is because you believe that they've done horrible things to civilians, correct? And they're Nazis.
I
and
believe
Nazis
that they
commit
are
war crimes.
Nazis.
And why is that bad?
Look,
Can you
there
tell
he
me why
goes
that's
again.
bad? Just tell me why that's bad. It's
Oh
a
my
really easy
God,
question.
Why is it bad to be a Nazi?
Yeah, if you're gonna give me wait,
I
just
no longer
allow me
take
to
you
allow me
seriously anymore now, man.
allow me. You're not being generous here. You're being very disingenuous.
Are you being generous,
Let me
Dylan?
be clear. Let me just, if you follow my logic for a second, okay? Why do you not like Nazis? Just tell me why. It's a very easy question. Because I don't like Nazis. I want to hear why you don't like them.
Because they have
Bro,
zero
for the same
tolerance
reason
for
you
other
don't like them,
people.
Dylan. Does that make it easier?
So because they're atrocious, they commit war crimes, they view Jews as subhuman, like all these things that we agree. Okay, so if your goal is to denazify Ukraine, choosing the people who hate Jews, who hate Romani people, and do all that to go get rid of Nazism, when they're going to be interacting with civilians, they're going to have opportunities to commit war crimes, they're going to have opportunities to do the atrocious acts that the Nazis did in World War II, this time in Ukraine. Why would they be the best choice to denazify the country? They're the worst choice because they're going to replace Nazis with more Nazis. It's bad.
Yeah, like you don't get
Do you know what a
Nazis to
spear
fucking
is?
fight Nazis. That's like a dumb fucking thing to do. Like,
Do you know how a
Okay, so
spear is
seriously,
shaped?
I'm gonna.
Like an arrowhead,
I'm gonna-
right? There's the
Yes.
point of the arrow,
Wait,
it's very
second,
small.
One second.
And then the
I'm
base of the
talking
arrow,
about
which is a
you.
little bit
Ginger talk.
bigger.
But the thing
Let
is,
Ginger
with the
talk.
spear,
The
that
majority of the
arrow-
Russian
has
forces
like
are normal
5
people,
words in the
and they use
entire
a
panel.
spearhead, the point of the
Ginger
arrow.
has gotten like 5 words in this entire panel. Let Ginger talk. Thank you.
Ginger, go.
Thank you. Seriously, I just want to say that you can't say, "Oh well, Ukrainians bomb. They're bombing their own people. They're bombing their own people. They're bombing their own people." When you're saying that Russia has the right to take over Ukraine, saying that Ukrainians are Russians and Ukraine is Russian, then they are bombing their own people. By your definition, they're bombing their own people by saying that that Ukraine belongs to Russia.
So when the
go on.
police shoot a murderer, right? Is that a problem because he shot a U.S. citizen or something? Like I'm talking about in
No,
America.
no. You can't turn you can't turn my argument back on me because
No, I'm
that's
trying
what
to
you
listen
keep
to it.
doing.
What is it?
No, that's what you keep doing with everybody instead of
I'm
actually
trying to
answering a
listen.
fucking
Will you tell me
question.
what your point is?
I already told you my point, but instead of actually listening to me, you're just responding back to me.
He's trying to he's trying to make a counter argument, and so he's trying to give you an example that might make his logic make more sense to you.
Right, yeah. His logic works if you take this like international diplomacy and you make it just two people.
Listen, everybody here uses like abstract examples. It's like a very typical way of trying to make a point. You know,
Yeah, and I'm saying it's a bad
unreasonable.
one.
So that's fine, but I
Yeah.
don't think he's even talking to you.
Nays guard.
Yeah, but he's talking
There's
to
multiple
me, and
people
I'm
here. Are we
saying-
going back to just two people talking?
I'm saying I'm not going to re-answer his question. because That's what he keeps
Just
doing to
refusing
Dylan.
You're
to
saying
acknowledge
that
this
if I'm saying Ukrainians are Russians and then Russians are attacking Ukraine, that means Russians are attacking Russians, right? I'm saying it's okay for police to attack people that are citizens of the same country as the police because those people are being criminals. Russians aren't attacking Ukrainians because they're Ukrainian. They're attacking the Ukrainians that are killing other Ukrainians, right? They're attacking criminals. They're not targeting civilian people who are innocent.
They are, though.
So do
That's
they
the
bomb-
problem.
so-
Well,
so
that's
do
your
they-
claim.
do they
That's
bomb-
your
I
claim.
have
So do
video
they bomb
evidence of it.
cities and-
Multiple video
We
evidence.
have more
Both
video
satellites
evidence of Ukrainians actually destroying other Ukrainians.
Wait, listen to your claim. Your claim was they don't target civilians. I say I have evidence of them targeting civilians. In response is, well, actually, I have more evidence of Ukrainians. So it's feel like you backed off of it immediately.
What
You just
happens
did
in
a
a war?
whataboutism. You just did a whataboutism.
What just happened with that defense missile that landed in Poland? Was that an accident?
Yeah, I believe
it
was an
missed,
accident.
right? Yeah,
it
some
missed.
things happen where they miss. There are
But there's
cases
some
where
cases
civilians have
where
been
you put a civilian
accidentally
on the wall,
killed by
you aim a
Russian
gun in
weapons.
their head
That
and
doesn't
pull
mean
the
they were
trigger.
targeted,
That isn't an
right?
accident.
Except the difference here is
They
that Ukrainians are
execute
targeting
people.
civilians
They
and Russians are
execute
not
people.
targeting Ukrainians, right? That's the difference.
We have a batch of audio that has been that Russian soldiers have called back home to call back to their wives and talk to them. This audio showing them talking to their wives about the things they have done, the people they've shot, the crimes they've committed at the brink, not understanding exactly when they decided to lose their humanity and do these horrible things to other humans.
See, the devil is in the details, and you're picking these certain details that have no context, and we don't know what.
That's around
was it a
Bucha. What
was it a
happened in
Rurich
Bucha?
person?
What happened in Bucha?
You're gonna bring up Bucha now, right?
We can bring
Okay,
up
cool.
Bucha, we can bring up Izium, we can bring up Lyman, we can bring up any of these locations where mass graves have been uncovered.
Do you know what CSI can do? They can tell how long a body is dead just by the temperature. Did you know that?
There were satellite photographs of the bodies before it was retaken by Ukrainian soldiers. Those bodies were there before the Ukrainian soldiers got there.
How long does it? Do you know how long does it take for a body to decompose?
I don't
Russia
know
left
how
3
long.
days before they were found. Those bodies were not 3 days old. This is basic,
Many
like
of
ultra
yes,
basic
of
level
course, of
crime
course,
scene investigation.
Of course, a lot
that
of those,
means they were killed by Ukrainians,
no,
bro.
They were killed in intense fighting. They were killed in intense fighting, or sometimes in executions. For example,
It's not even. We don't even have to sit here and talk about who killed them or what. You can just go by the time they were killed. They've been dead for less than a day or a day or something. It could not be possible for them to have been killed by Russians. They simply were not there.
Satellite photographs.
Those, I don't know what photographs you're referencing. Those could be made
photographs,
up. What can't be made up is the level of decomposition of
made up.
Queen Alexa. I'm dying here. The satellite photographs were taken before the Russian army withdrawal that shows bodies in the street. All reports seem to indicate
put the timestamp on that satellite?
Due to the intensity of the bombing, a lot of people died in artillery strikes in the fighting, and because of how heavy the shelling was, it was very difficult for people to recover bodies. But bodies were recovered and buried behind a local church I personally visited. These people were killed by the Russian military, either executed or killed in artillery bombardments. Like, we can pretend that it was the Ukrainians with no evidence whatsoever, and the satellite photos to prove that the bodies were there before they left, and you can try to become a fucking biologist and talk about body decomposition all you want. The photos don't lie. The eyewitness testimony doesn't lie. All this evidence came together to create this picture of what they did. And the thing is, the Russian soldiers admitted. They admitted to their wives in phone calls back to their home that were documented. And you can listen to these phone calls right now. If you Google them, you can listen to these soldiers talking about how they executed people because they were scared. They were going to tell the Ukrainian soldiers where their position was.
Okay, I need to point this out before y'all continue. This was so fucking funny. So I muted Schlatsky there, and then as I mute him, when I unmute him for just a moment, he's still mid screaming. So he continued yelling after muting, and I thought that was funny.
Wow, that was hilarious.
It was.
It was pretty good.
Someone clip that.
Shape it and clip it.
I'm sure we will.
Donald Trump,
you can tell how long a body has been dead.
I want.
It's very simple.
Are you a biologist?
Not very.
I'm not a biologist.
It
I'm not the
someone
crime scene
specialized
investigators
in
that were investigating the crimes.
Yeah, and what did
takes
they all
someone
say?
specialized
Oh,
in
this
that.
looks like
They say that the bodies were not dead for 3 days.
Yeah, so you're
It's
saying
very
that,
obvious. A 3-day-old
some
body
of them,
versus a
it
1-day-old body. It's a big difference.
That's not all the bodies. There were different bodies. Some bodies were more fresh.
What
some
about the bodies
a
that
lot
were wearing
older.
armbands signifying support for Russia? You think Russians just killed Russian supporters?
Or wait, what do you mean single? If they're wearing armbands, that means they're soldiers. You don't wear an armband unless you're a soldier.
You're wearing an armband to clarify that you're supporting
No,
the
you
Russians.
don't.
No, that's not how those work.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
So then they killed Russian soldiers. Whatever the fuck. Their point is that they were Russian aligned. Why would they kill?
Because it's war. What do you mean?
Yeah, so it wasn't Russians who killed them because the Russians weren't fucking there.
Well, I'm not talking about the bodies of soldiers. I'm talking about the bodies of civilians. The bodies of soldiers were killed in fighting.
The bodies of the people in Bucha, soldiers, civilians, all of them. None of them were killed by Russians because Russians weren't fucking there.
None of
That's
them.
not true.
None of them were killed by Russians.
The satellite photos show that that the bodies were there before they left.
When was the satellite photo taken? Who put the timestamp on the photo?
5 to
What are you
6
talking
days
about?
before they
I'm
left.
telling you that a body
Maxer.
decomposes at a set rate. It doesn't change whether you're Ukrainian or Russian.
But the thing is, there were bodies that were decomposed and there were bodies that were not decomposed. It depended on the body. There were a bunch of bodies. Some bodies were already buried in the church by then. Bodies that had been executed with their hands tied behind their backs. You can't do that from a distance.
So Ukrainians tied people up and shot them in the head, dude.
If those bodies are decomposing and their hands are tied behind their back and they're in a mass grave, and the Russians were the person occupying that part of the city for 2 to 3 weeks, there's only one force that could have done that. And it
were
was
the bodies
Russians.
2 to 3 weeks decomposed? Of course,
Yes,
you're going to say yes.
some of them were,
yeah,
yes.
of course. Yeah.
What? Look,
some of them were.
The only way, at the end of the day, someone can come out of this situation, look at the history, and supporting Russia is if you deliberately look away from the war crimes.
Bro, you're deliberately looking away from Ukrainian war crimes.
Trying to walk away and trying to redefine
deliberately looking away from Ukrainian war crimes.
They cannot accept the fact that they support
You have a war
rapists,
crime.
murderers.
You can't accept the fact that you support Nazis, bro.
What do you mean? What Nazis do I support?
Can I point something
No, you
out?
just cheering on Russian Nazis, bro. What the fuck is going on?
Wait, hold on, Slotsky. You're picking at the fact that only some of them had decayed, but you're getting the fact that this was in the middle of winter. Okay, so that
all
slows
goes
down
into
the
it.
decay
Okay,
process.
Okay,
Whatever.
how did it come
You
into
guys,
it? Talk about winter
everyone,
decomposition.
everyone here
Let me
knows
hear you,
more
Mr.
than me.
Biologist.
Okay,
Tell me about
that's
winter
pretty clear.
decomposition.
Well, I
Tell
don't
me.
even know why you're even listening to me. Whatever.
You brought up
Go on.
decomposition. Tell me about it. How does winter affect decomposition? How do you think? How much do you
Obviously,
think
it
would have
slows it
affected
down. But the
Oh,
thing
yeah.
is,
Oh,
people,
yeah?
crime scene investigators who are investigating crimes that happen in winter know that it's winter. Oh, fuck, man.
Oh,
Jesus
really?
Christ.
And who are you citing? Which crime scene investigator that talked about, yeah, we accounted for the winter?
I don't know. Who are
time.
you citing, bro?
You're the one who brought up the decomposition. I don't need to cite it. You're
the one who brought
it
up that Bucha was done by Russians. I'm
Yes,
saying...
I brought it up, and you
there's-
brought evidence to counter it, and now you don't know anything about the evidence you used to counter it.
Oh my god.
I'm saying I have satellite photos, right?
And you use a lot of examples.
Satellite
of
photos that you don't know when they were taken.
Yes, we do. They were taken a week
No, you
before
don't.
the Russians left. I just told you.
You don't know
What do
any
mean?
more about when those
I
satellite
do.
photos were
I
taken
can
than
send
I
you
know
the
about what
satellite
the
photos.
state of decomposition of every individual
I can't.
body in
It's
Bucha.
dated. It's dated on the photo.
Yeah, and you know what you can do with photos.
Oh, it was photoshopped. I'm sure it was photoshopped. Just like
Okay. Hold on. Everyone stop. Okay. This is funny as fuck, but we do need to let other people go. Okay. Y'all are fucking wonderful. All right. I want to let Naze Garden go. He's been trying to chime in.
Thank you so much, man. Look, it's like, man, you're using a lot of examples of violence, bro. You go, you know, Russian soldiers did this and Russia did this way back when. And there's a lot of violence that you point to so that you can basically just justify your own violence, man. It's like you don't even realize it.
Absolutely.
It's all you're talking about.
Absolutely.
This is my excuse for doing war, is because
Absolutely.
they did all this violence, so now we can go do violence to them. And you should hear yourself, brother.
Yes.
It's like you're an atrocity in here. Among
You're
a
an
bunch of
atrocity,
people
brother.
that want peace, and you're sitting here just preaching war.
Let me
You
be
know, and I'm
clear.
sick of it.
Let me
I'm
be
really
clear.
sick of it.
Murderers, rapists, war criminals, right? If they do not surrender, then hopefully they will be pushed out of the country.
Calibrated.
Look, I'm doing my careful to stay within TOS. But if these people go to these places and commit war crimes, that is 100% a justification to say, yes, we should push back against the people doing atrocities. That is a justification. For example, I believe that let me finish my point. You asked, yeah, let me be clear. I believe
It's a great cycle, brother.
bombing
You wanna
Germany
play right
was
into it.
justified because of the Holocaust and because of the horrible things that they did. I think that it was justified to fight the Germans that way. I believe it's true of any nation engaged in either genocides or horrific atrocities against humanity. And what we saw in Bucha, what we saw in Izium with the largest mass grave uncovered in Europe since the Yugoslav Civil War with 447 bodies, right? I think those do justify the Ukrainian people picking up arms and defending themselves.
8,000
they
is
don't
more than
end up
400.
in those
But
but that's
I'm
one
playing
mass
into the
grave.
same
More
thing.
people died in Mariupol, 10 times more people died in Mariupol than in the Donbass conflict up until this point. And that was due to Russian bombing. It's not even comparable. It's not.
Okay. So before we get Sprout, you said that you do need to leave.
Yeah, I have another panel to go to. I didn't think
Okay.
this would take
Go
2
ahead.
hours, but
Yeah. Go ahead and give yourself a shout out and where we can find you.
okay. Yeah, I am the Sprouticus. I am on Twitch and Twitter as the Sprouticus. If you like what you heard, go give me a follow. If you don't like what you heard, yell at me on Twitter, do something. I'll probably respond to you. If you want to have a conversation on stream, then I'm open to that as well. So yeah, I'm the Sprouticus, and appreciate Alexa, and enjoy the conversation, everybody else.
Always Sprout. See you, buddy.
Don't tell me what to do.
All right, continue on.
Donald Trump was just unbanned on Twitter.
Oh,
Let's
shit.
fucking go! Woo!
Now it's
Something
about to
good
get
happened
good.
tonight.
I'm in a hotel. I just screamed.
It's about to get good.
I don't really know where to go with this, guys. I kind of lost.
New
it.
bail topic.
I
Trump being banned on Twitter.
don't know what the fuck is going on anymore. I mean, I appreciate the disagreement before. I just don't know enough to comment either way, if I'm being totally honest.
I have a
But
question.
look, I mean, my concern with this consistently has always been this notion that Russia commits atrocities exclusively, or the Russian atrocities are such that we have to do X as Americans or Europeans or whatever to fund Ukraine to, in my view, proliferate a war that's killing more people. To me, like, that just doesn't add up, and it never will. I haven't been convinced otherwise. I think the consequences of the war continuing are more people dying. And I just don't really see the argument that, like, well, you know, if we keep fighting the war, eventually, you know, we keep pouring more and more money, more and more weapons into it. Eventually, it'll just stop. You know, we don't know how, but it'll just stop. I don't know.
I think we can come to a compromise, right? Like we could just give them the good shit right now, and then it'll just go over quicker.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, the A-10 Warthog. I'm even though we're not allowed to, I personally believe that the Ukrainian military should have access to an A-10 Warthog.
Dude, awesome. You guys like sometimes, and I don't know you personally. I don't know how serious you're being, but I do feel like there is this weird like war masturbation that goes on with this. Like a lot of liberals feel like, well, now we're on the good side, so we can like really like get into the whole idea of lots of people dying if we utilize this like super weapon or these like cool weapons, these cool missiles, and you know, it's like the whole like fetishization of like war and killing and all this shit. It's fucking really weird coming from people who are like
it's not
insinuating that the other. All right, well now you just talk, motherfucker. Come on, bro. You filibuster constantly. Just let me finish. It's just like this weird, I don't know, masturbatory like exercise with like death. And then we're like supposedly like going in there to like correct Russian atrocities. It just doesn't make sense.
I think it's not. We're not intervening only because of Russian atrocities. They could have committed not a single war crime, and I still would support Ukraine because I believe Ukraine is in the correct position. They're the nation that was invaded. They want to run their affairs differently. The Russians lied about this every step of the way when it comes to, oh, this is a training operation on the border. You don't need to worry about anything. Then they invaded for like the second time in under 8 years. So I don't think we need to even like bring in the atrocities into consideration when it gets to the basics of the conflict. But it's a lot easier for me to make my argument for supporting Ukraine once you look at the full picture of Russia doing the atrocities that they have done and the scale of the destruction that they've brought to Ukraine. Now, when it comes to this idea of like masturbatory behavior towards war, if we're going to enter a war, I think we enter wars to win. The idea is that you have a goal and you want to achieve that goal, and you do everything you can to either achieve that goal or get it within close of possible of that goal while maintaining the rules of war. And I think
Dylan,
that
you're not in the war, bro.
What do you mean I'm not in the war?
You're not in the war. You're not fighting anyone.
I'm not fighting anyone. You're right. I'm taking photographs. I'm taking video.
Yeah, so
but
you're
asking
like
my opinion about supporting
NATO
Ukraine.
and all this shit on Twitter is like fucking weird, dude.
I support it. I've you know, raised money for bulletproof vests. I've raised money for ATVs that are in use by the Ukrainian military.
Why not for food?
I have also raised money for food and for vegetable cutters and bowls and utensils and medical aid as well. I've raised money for both. But the thing is, it's not that we're masturbatory towards war. It's that we believe in the cause and we want to win. And we see every Ukrainian victory as one step closer to getting the Russians out of Ukraine.
And
you can tell, hey, you say, hey, I stopped when I interrupted you. Okay. Thank you. So I think also that when you talk about this idea of like, oh, so when do we stop? Like, we're just going to send in weapons over forever. I would be more receptive to that argument if Ukraine hasn't shown its ability to overperform expectations at every step of the way. People thought Ukraine was going to collapse in a week. Then they didn't. It's day 265 and the government's still standing. People didn't think they would be able to keep Kiev. They pushed back the Russians from Kiev. They took back the territory around Kharkiv.
News, bro.
They took
Fake
Kupiansk.
news.
They took Kherson. They pushed the Russians over the river.
Go there. You're gonna play the MSM narrative with us?
I don't
Who
care
are you,
if
fucking CNN, bro?
Yeah, I'm CNN.
Really?
Dylan Burns. I'm the CIA's favorite intern. I'm the
just wants to be
CIA's favorite
CNN.
intern. I don't care.
He really wishes he was CIA.
But the thing is, whether you can call these things fake, but these are historical events that happened. Okay, whether you like it or not, the Russians withdrew
like the
from
war in
Kiev.
Donbass.
The Russians had to leave Kherson. The Russians lost the battle for Kupiansk. They lost the battle for Kharkiv. They lost the battle for Mykolaiv, and they're on the ropes. And so I believe we should continue to support them. Everything I just said is true. Say one thing out of that was not
the
true.
war in Donbass is also true, but that's propaganda, right? But what you're saying is
I didn't say it was
true.
propaganda. I acknowledged the war in Donbass. I have a different interpretation of those events. I believe that the reason the Russians withdrew over the river is because they couldn't supply their troops across the river.
I believe the reason was because they're protecting the potential civilian casualties from Ukraine trying to blow up the dam and flood a bunch of people just to get at Russians. They're willing to destroy their own civilians just for a military victory.
The Russians
That's pretty
have not
gross.
shown themselves to be that considerate about civilian casualties when engaging in this war. If they did, they wouldn't have launched it in the first place, considering how many civilians have died in this war.
If they didn't care about civilian casualties, they would have taken Kyiv by now. The fact
No,
that it's
they
taking
would-
so
no,
long
it's
is
just that-
evidence of the fact that they are being slow and very careful and very
No,
methodical about
they-
their operations.
They dropped
is
VDV air
immoral,
troopers
morally
outside the
corrupt,
capital on the
bankrupt
first
man.
day and claimed that they disabled the entirety of Ukraine's air force. Now,
Bro,
the
you don't
VDV
believe Russians. I don't know
the
why you're
VDV
believing them there.
The VDV, yeah, exactly. You should agree with me and not believe.
So you
But
shouldn't
the
be believing what they were saying.
The VDV landings happened. There's photograph, video evidence from both Russian soldiers and Ukrainian
Yeah, and
soldiers that they
in
attempted
World
to
War
do
II, they
VDV
propped
landings.
up a bunch of
And those
cardboard and
VDV
tanks and
landings,
inflatable
Those
aircraft.
Russian
I mean,
VDV
there's-
landings failed, and they lost some of their best soldiers in those landings. That
Says you.
advance on Kiev lost them tens of thousands of soldiers. Not says me, says the Institute for the
That's
Study
your
of War,
narrative.
says any other war journalist that covered that offensive.
Did the
says
Russian
the
Ministry of
locals.
Defense say that we lost our best soldiers and you guys totally fucked us?
Russia's death toll right now is 2,000. That's
What's the Ukrainian
do you
army death
believe
toll?
that? Do you believe it's 2,000 soldiers? They've lost 2,000 in 8 months of fighting, even though they've been pushed back from Kherson.
What does Ukraine say that their death toll is?
Kherson, Kiev, like all these areas. What is Kiev?
Actually, Russia has a lot of practice of
says it's about 80,000.
high attrition rates of enemy forces. They've been
80,000 to
practicing this a lot
85,000.
since Germany invaded Russia. They're very good at retreating while
they haven't
incurring heavy
learned.
damage
They
on the
don't-
invading party.
So why did
Yeah,
the
they're
Battle
really
of
good at
Lyman?
kicking ass.
Why did they get encircled at Lyman and then get slaughtered? Slaughtered to the point that some Ukrainian soldiers actually had to request therapy for the amount of Russian soldiers they killed.
Dylan,
during that.
can I just make a point?
Come on,
'Cause we were like kind of
I'm just sorry. Like you're people are
I know,
pretending like
alright.
the Ukrainians have no chance of
God damn
winning,
it,
but at every single intersection, the Russians
You're
have took
pretending they
Ls.
do.
Bruh.
The Russians have taken L's at every single intersection. It's day 270. Dog, the
Ukraine
war is
lost Donbass. That's not an L.
They haven't lost all the Donbass. I went to Kramatorsk myself. It's still Ukrainian.
Obsession with Donbass.
I
thought
went
you
to the
said you couldn't
Donbass.
go
It's
to the
still controlled by
Donbass.
the Ukrainians, large parts of it.
What, you couldn't talk to people there? You told me that you couldn't go there.
I did talk to Eastern Ukrainians, and you want to know what they told me? I remember there was this one person who told me, I speak Russian here, but I speak Ukrainian here. They were an older person talking about how the cultural influences of the Russian Federation and of the Russian Empire and of the Soviet Union stopped him from learning the language, stopped them from learning Ukrainian, and I think I disconnected, didn't I? God damn it. What is up with my Discord? That was a good point too, yeah.
I mean, do you deny that or?
Oh no, you're talking to Dylan.
Hello.
Yeah, no, I thank you because I did have one point to make to him, but I think he is he back?
Hello, I'm
Lost
back.
video.
Should I finish? Should I finish my point?
Dylan, good to see you.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
So I did go to Kramatorsk. I did go to Eastern Ukraine, right? But I didn't go to all of Eastern Ukraine. I went to Kramatorsk. I went to Donbass, but I didn't go through all the Donbass. But from my discussions with locals, there was very much this feeling of definitely amongst the elderly population that I talked to, that, you know, when they were young, they wished they learned Ukrainian, but they didn't. It wasn't really taught. If you were to live in one of the big cities, the idea is that you speak Russian because Ukrainian is the backwater hillbilly language. And a lot of them have actually experienced kind of like a cultural reawakening where they're rediscovering their language that has been suppressed for them. In many the same ways that Irish people talk about not learning the language of their ancestors because of English imperialism and English cultural assimilation, forcing them to learn English, but they're trying to, you know, have these classes in schools talking about it. That was the feeling I got from my conversations with local people in the Donbass. There are people who support Russia, but they're a minority from my experience. If you're asking about my experience, but I'm just one person.
Okay,
That's
thank
honest. Dylan, you're talking about that whole Liman, you know, encirclement and all that. And I guess this sort of like speaks to what I was trying to say before about like the masturbatory celebration of like killing and shit. Like you tweeted on September 29th about the encirclement at Liman and something that you just described as this major, I guess, massacre. And you're like tweeting out pictures of like NAFO dogs like shooting machine guns and like these close pan shots to their face where they're like looking psychotic. And it just seems to me like you guys get off on this, you know, like that's kind of my point. And there's something like really uncomfortable about that to me, like a real profound like lack of respect for like human life. That's just a little like disturbing. And, you know, regardless, I mean, I guess I could understand if you're just like so hardcore pro Ukraine that like, hey, that's how I feel. But I hate when we get into this whole territory of like talking about which countries' atrocities are worse. Because I basically agree that like, yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if we agree. I think all countries commit atrocities. No country is free of sin. I said that before. So when we celebrate like shitloads of people dying, whatever the circumstances are, to me, that's just like a little morbid. And like, it makes me feel like there's this, I don't know, like undercurrents with liberals where they're supposedly like good people who care about everybody. And so then when they like have a cause of some kind that involves, you know, like their side killing people, it's like a good thing. Like, I don't know, just seems fucking weird.
I guess for me, right, this isn't like something I'm passively like just monitoring. This is something I've actively involved myself in, either through aid deliveries or covering it on the ground. And I have a lot of friends, people I'm very close with, who are deeply affected by the war. So for me, when the Ukrainians win a victory, that's a good thing. That's something that makes me happy, because to me, that's like we're one step closer to this being over and one step closer to Ukraine finally being free. And so if I meme about it, if I joke about it in a way that is distasteful for you because I posted like dogs with machine guns or whatever, I mean, that's fine. You don't need to follow me. That's my sense of humor. That's the way I joke about things. But to me,
but it's not a joke, bro.
Like I can joke about anything. This is my job, right? My job.
How many
is to
people
do
on the
this.
right are
So
joking about
I will
it?
joke. I will make a joke about it. And the thing is, my jokes sometimes
but
they're
you're
pretty
saying
edgy.
liberals,
But this is
so
generally
you're
a tame
separating
joke,
us,
like a
aren't
dog
you?
with a machine
The reason
gun.
I'm
like,
pointing,
it's like,
you know,
who cares?
wait, can I answer her? Because I just want to make a point. The reason I'm pointing at liberals is actually because I'm on the left. And so if anything, I should be more ideologically aligned with liberals, right? Like generally, when I was growing up, being a liberal meant you were anti-war. It meant you were pro-peace. And now it's like this weird position where like the liberals are kind of like how the neocons used to be. The neocons used to say shit like, yeah, we're going to turn Iraq into a parking lot. You know, you know, if anyone fucks with us, I knew a guy from Long Island who said he wanted to join the military so he could go hunting Hajis. Like that shit that right-wingers used to say because they had a justifiable reason because of 9/11. And now I'm hearing from liberals, well, we have a justifiable reason to give weapons to Ukraine so they can annihilate Russians and we can just celebrate.
Did not do 9/11. Russia
Dylan, I'm
invaded Ukraine. That's the difference.
Do you
Ukrainians killed Russians in Ukraine.
No, they didn't.
Two of you, I swear.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, do you feel like that liberals were against us helping in World War II? Like just because you're against war, no, hold on. Just because you're against war doesn't mean that, or that you're for peace doesn't mean that when there's a necessity to step in, that you're not there for it. That you're not there for helping those people that need
So
help.
this came up in my debate with Dylan, actually. Why do you think America came in and entered World War II?
Because we didn't want to become Germany.
Really? So what if I told you you're not correct about that? And that there was this thing called Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, I know about Pearl Harbor.
Right. So we didn't enter
on
the
Pearl
war
Harbor.
before that. So in other words, it wasn't this virtuous thing. You know, the Nazis held rallies in
Well,
Madison Square Garden, right?
no. I didn't say that it was a virtuous thing, so don't turn it around.
No,
I'm saying
but
that
okay, but you did say, well, how did liberals feel about the war effort? And I guess what you're alluding to is the fact that liberal-minded people back then would have wanted to get involved in the European theater of World War II to like liberate the Jewish people. And what I'm telling you is that there was not at all a consensus about what we should do during World War II in America whatsoever. And that's the reason we didn't enter the war until we were attacked.
In fact, a huge anti-war movement.
We did, but our government did support the British. We supported through aid and material weapons.
And we also posted
Union. When you say we supported Nazis, we didn't send weapons and we didn't send material goods to the Nazis.
Companies in America did business with Nazi Germany,
but that's different than the American State Department or the American government.
Yeah, but we did nothing to stop American
because the American government directly supported the British against the Nazis.
Yeah, we also allowed American businesses to do business with Nazi Germany and did nothing to stop it. Well, that's what I'm trying to say.
Even
It's
if
like
our
there's
motives
no
aren't correct, even if it leads to the good outcome, we should still support it.
You guys want to attribute moral purity to America, and it's just as dishonest as what you accuse Russian supporters of doing.
I do not believe that the United States is a morally pure nation. It is engaged in genocide against Native Americans. Slavery was a horrific institution that needed to be brought down. And you want to know what?
Abolished first in Russia.
And if I was alive during the Civil War, I'd be posting memes about beating the Confederates at Antietam and all these battles. I would be posting whatever the Civil War version of that is, because that's just the type of person I am. If that offends you, it offends you. But the thing is, whether or not you're right, it isn't the Civil War, but my point is, I think this is a moral struggle, and I think that was a moral struggle. The thing is, though, when you talk about like, oh, Dylan, the United States doesn't have like completely pure interests. No nation state operating on the planet today does not act within its own interests in mind. That does not mean that us as individuals should not ask nation states to get involved in conflicts where it can have a positive impact, like us supporting this war. I am positive supporting the Ukrainian defense against the Russian invasion. I am positive that the amount of aid that we have given Ukraine would not be this immense if it wasn't for the very overwhelming American support for Ukraine and sending over aid. I think we would have sent aid no matter what, but I think that the American perception of the war has had an impact.
Do you think it's possible that we as moral individuals are being used by state departments in their own desires or whatever? Our moral feelings about things are being used against us in order for us to
What do you mean
end up
used
supporting
against
these things.
you? What do you mean like I don't think it's against American interests to support this, to support the Ukrainians. I believe it's within American interests, yes. I believe it's within our economic interests, and I believe it's within our moral interests.
Yikes. What?
What?
Yeah. I don't know, man. I always feel like
our country's like crumbling before our eyes, but we should still.
What do you mean our country's crumbling? People talk about America like it's the fall of Rome constantly. Been doing it for the last 40 years. We're still standing. And if you were to compare the Russian invasion of Ukraine to the American invasion of Iraq, the efficiency of our two militaries isn't even comparable.
Financial position.
Yeah, because the Americans had no qualms about destroying civilians in Iraq.
The Russians don't have any qualms about annihilating civilians in Ukraine.
Bro, 500,000 children died in the Middle East.
Yeah.
What are you even saying?
500,000 children did not die in the 28 days of the invasion of Iraq. The occupation of Iraq was a different story. I don't know if you talk about sanctions, but in 28 days, we don't even have the logistical capability to kill those much children. The war was 28 days. The occupation.
How many people did we kill with a nuclear bomb? In Japan, 2 of them.
What the fuck? In one day. What does this have to do with Iraq?
We have the capability. I'm just saying. You're like, we don't have. Of course, we have. We could kill everyone on this planet in 20 minutes.
And so did we nuke Iraq? Is that what you're saying?
What's
I'm saying that Americans killed a shitload of civilians in Iraq, way more than Russia is in Ukraine.
Yeah, what you're saying now is the same.
I don't actually know that. I actually don't agree with that.
Do you not remember shock and awe? Were you still in diapers at the time?
Well, I was in diapers, but I was still not a Russia supporter because I was still smarter than that. But the thing is, if you look at the American war in Iraq, the war was 28 days, and there was an occupation afterwards. The amount of people who died during the war, that's disputed, but it's not near 500,000. Then there's the occupation, which is
so you're arguing for the state that occupied a sovereign nation for 19 years as the moral arbiter of the planet?
Fuck it, you're not letting me finish anything. You're just concluding things I don't believe and just saying it out loud with an outrage.
He literally said that he didn't believe it was the moral
arbiter. I don't believe the United States is the perfect nation state on earth. I believe nation states act within their own interests, and sometimes those interests intersect with what is the morally correct thing to do. When
you know how Germany paid.
I'm done. I'm done. Queen likes to move on.
He's muted. He's muted.
Okay. I believe that when we're talking about the invasion of Ukraine, this is 265 days now, right? Where they haven't even achieved the capturing of territory that they wanted to do to occupy the country. When they advanced on Kiev, their intention was to see the government collapse and then they take over the country. Either replace Zelensky with Yanukovych or just do an occupation. America was able to achieve that in 28 days in Iraq. And then afterwards, that's when the majority of people died, during the occupation. The Russians haven't even gotten to that point where there's nobody that can dispute their power and fight back, and then it's all like rebel fighting and guerrilla warfare. So the Russians haven't even gotten to the point we were during the invasion of Iraq. If we wanted to compare the invasion of Iraq and Ukraine, actually, like on its, like really point to point, because I don't think these wars are comparable. If you were to do that, you would have to wait until the Russians actually took over the whole fucking country, and then during that occupation, what exactly do they do? How do they treat civilians? We can see from their occupation in Izium, Lyman, that they've made mass graves, they filled mass graves, and engaged in horrific behavior. We shouldn't have invaded Iraq, but we should not be downplaying the scale of the atrocities that the Russian army is engaged in Ukraine by comparison.
Okay, before we keep going, we got 10 more minutes and we're going to wrap it up. Somebody online, go.
Appreciate it, Alexa. Again, the distinction that I want to make between the Iraq war and the situation that we have going on in Ukraine right now, the most important distinction is the United States wasn't trying to annex Iraq or Afghanistan. On the other hand, Russia is currently trying to reduce the size of the borders of Ukraine. They're trying to invade a sovereign nation and take territory away from them. They're not trying to stop any bad actions from occurring within these nations. They're not trying to stop any mistreatment of the government or change any actions. They're not going through the proper procedures through the UN to sanction these nations or do anything like that. They're literally just trying to take territory from these other from the other nations. Like, this is an aggressive act. This is completely different than everything that has occurred within the United States. And we can't throw around like ideas like, well, this is how many civilians have been killed by this side or that side. Like, in an active war zone, when we're talking about an active conflict, like, both sides are responsible for any casualties that occur in that active battle zone at that time. And to attribute like the responsibility to one side or the other is ridiculous. But again, the UN statement says, like, you're not allowed to invade other nations. The UN will go in and stop people, put people on trial for war crimes, and put an end to humanitarian crises. And at no point does it give Russia the right to go into another territory and go, we're taking this land away from you.
So U.S. was more justified in Iraq than Russia is justified in Ukraine?
100%, because again, the United States did not annex Iraq. Russia is trying to annex parts of Ukraine.
So this is why I know a lot of like libs hate when people talk about.
Again? Why does it keep happening? What is up with my computer, guys? This is unbelievably frustrating. Every single 5 seconds. Every single 5 seconds. Why does that keep happening? Dude, I need to get my computer fixed. Because I have no clue what I'm doing, and I need to get like a repairman or something, but it's going to cost so much money. Money I'd rather not spend. Ugh. There we go.
So, and in terms of like both sides being, I might have misunderstood you, but are you saying both sides, like, okay, in the case of the U.S. invading Iraq, both the U.S. and Iraq were responsible for the people who died in that conflict? Because, dude, we went in 2003 and just with shock and awe, just bombed the fuck out of Baghdad, like in an attempt to end the war as quickly as possible. Even if you want to get into Saddam being a bad guy and all that stuff, I don't see how you can look at that as any other thing than just the U.S. massacring people. How's that the fault of the Iraqis?
No, I'm not. Again, in situations like we're talking about with Iraq, it's very clear like who's responsible for each situation, because there's a wide disparagement in like the types of armaments that the two different sides had. We're talking about like guerrilla warfare groups versus people with freaking drones and fighter jets and whatnot. But in Ukraine, the situation is extremely different. And when we're talking about unverified reports and who's responsible for individual deaths in individual spots, like, it's very easy to throw around blame and responsibility as far as like who killed the first person in the conflict and where did the dying first start and who's responsible for the deaths in this particular region. It's a little bit grayer and a little bit muddier, and to say that there is a moral righteousness in some way as a result of deaths of civilians, at no point does it give Russia the authority to go in and annex the territory of another nation. If they've committed like humanitarian crimes against their people, there are like methods and procedures by which these things are dealt with properly, and invading another sovereign nation and taking their territory is not like the proper answer to any of this.
Well, the U.S. invaded Afghanistan as a response to the attacks on September 11th that resulted in 3,000 civilians dying.
Were they trying to make it the 51st state and make them fly the American flag? And
Russia's not trying to make Ukraine the Russian state.
It is kind of. It annexed a lot of territory.
They didn't annex. The territories voted to join.
They did and they didn't. It was a referendum. And the referendum was fake, and you know it's fake. And I am sick of people gaslighting me on this. Like, you don't actually.
Bro, you're gaslighting everyone right now.
Actually believe that the referendum was legitimate. 96% in Kherson. 96.
You just said that like there was only 10 people that voted, so maybe it was 96%. For fuck's sake,
but
I don't know.
That's the thing. You think 96% is an accurate depiction of what the people who were living in Kherson pre-invasion wanted?
If you ask people what color is the sky, do you think you get 96% to say that it's blue?
Yeah, but the difference between the color of the sky, which you can look up and see,
if you got a place that's majority ethnically Russian and asked them if they wanted to join Russia and receive protection from their people back like they used to before Ukraine existed, do you think they would approach those numbers, or it's just impossible?
Do you think that the majority of Mexicans in Texas want like Mexico to?
The majority of Mexicans in Texas are not the majority of Texans.
Yeah, but that's the thing. The thing is
that ethnic Russians are the majority in Donbass.
We're not talking. I'm talking about Kherson. 96%. Kherson. It's a ridiculous number. Kherson is very, very pro-Ukrainian. It's very
okay. I'm not talking about Kherson.
Well,
I'm talking about Donbass. Kherson's not in Donbass.
But you're using the referendum as a means of like this justifies the annexation because they wanted it. And so if the referendum in Kherson was fraudulent as fuck, then that seems to indicate that probably all the referendums were fraudulent as fuck because they were all organized around the same time by the same people.
That's a huge assumption.
So you would think they would rig one but not the other, and they all seem to be about.
You have no proof that they rigged.
Yeah, exactly.
I do.
Zero evidence.
I have video of ballot stuffing. We know
every.
Then why did the international observers not bring it up?
There was no international observer that was going to hold them.
There literally were. That's a lie.
But the problem. Okay, who's the international observer that you think is respectable? That was like a good person.
I don't have their individual names.
Okay.
Dylan.
No, the groups. It doesn't need to be individuals. Just a single group.
They are individuals. They're not. They didn't hire groups to go and do it.
There's no groups, no individuals, nothing.
Look, I'm just.
This is just silly because it's like, well, it's the thing is, this is like the North Koreans. They all voted for Kim Jong-un. Like they all love Kim Jong-un. You don't understand.
They definitely want to be under the control of Kim Jong-un more than they do the American.
But this is the same as just like you're accepting the state media talking point verbatim with no questions asked. That's what you're doing. You've decided that the American state media talking point, that's too mainstream. So what I'm going to do
You've decided that the people themselves are
is I'm going to accept the Russian state media talking point. And I'm saying that there's video evidence of ballot stuffing. They took 3 days to prep it. They told basically no one about it. They had people like soldiers going door to door and knocking. Hey, I need to guide you.
Bro, they had polling people going door to door, and they were escorted with military escorts because it's a war zone, buddy. You know that. You know that. You know that, and you're gaslighting everyone, bro.
But that's the problem. If somebody comes to your
you are gaslighting everyone, and you know it.
No, you know that if somebody comes to your home, knocks on the door, you open the door.
No one had to answer the door. There's video of people not answering the door. No one was held at gunpoint. You are gaslighting everyone. It doesn't matter if they're scared or not.
Why would you let me address the fact
they got to choose whether or not they answer the door,
and they brought them to these voting stations, then told them who to vote for.
People decided to go and vote,
they left,
or they decided not to. No one forced anyone.
3 days prep, and they didn't allow the people who were displaced to vote either, which is wrong.
The people who are displaced aren't living there.
They are living there. Their homes are there.
They're not, because they're displaced. They're not living there.
Their people are there. They've been forced off their homes. Okay, if I go into your neighborhood and I force everybody out, then I have a vote of me.
Bro, if I left the United States and I didn't live here anymore, should I vote on what goes on here? Like, I know as an American citizen have that right.
We do that.
Yes, that's how that works.
I know that I as an American citizen, but does that really make sense? If I spent 50 years living in Indonesia, should I be able to vote on on what goes
That's not
on
the
in
problem, but that's not
Washington,
what
D.C.?
happened. That's not what happened.
when
The
you're
people
yelling-
lived in Kherson for 50 years, and then the war forces them to leave Kherson, and then other people voted on them, including
It
soldiers,
certainly
by the
wasn't
way.
a majority. At the even taking all of your points is absolutely true, and it was not a majority of people who lived there that were displaced. Most people were not displaced. Most people
40
still
if
live there, and
if-
most people voted.
Who do you think would have stayed behind? Do you think it would have been a disproportionately pro-Russian crowd?
Why not?
Do you think
Sure.
that's a problem? If the
I would
people you're
think-
voting
Why
on
not?
is not all
Maybe
people
those
who live in
people,
the
if they
community?
don't want to be part of Russia, maybe they can move to Lvov. Maybe they can move to Kiev.
Maybe if the Russians, you know, if they want to be part of Russia, they can move to Russia. They can like leave the country that's being
Maybe
invaded and they go to Russia.
if Ukraine didn't want to lose those territories to Russia, they should not have been bombing them for 8 years.
They weren't bombing Kherson or Zaporozhia or
I'm not
Mykolaiv
talking about
for 8 years.
Kherson or Zaporozhia. I'm talking about the
But
Donbass.
that's what we're debating about.
And
If
you're
you wanna talk about
gaslighting the fuck out of me, Dylan. Like
and
you gaslight
maybe
everybody,
if the
bro.
Russians didn't want the shelling to happen,
what
maybe they wouldn't have
gaslighting
sent
means.
weapons or FSB agents or
Bro,
soldiers into the Donbass.
he was
which
just
they
telling
did.
me how military people were going door to door forcing people to vote. That
They
is
went- they
gaslighting because
did
that's
go
not
door to
true.
door. That's
That's not
true. That happened.
gaslighting.
They went door to
Wait,
door.
wait a
they
second. When
knocked
he
on
said
the
that-
door, and they said the polling station's over there with their guns in tow. And what do you think they're going to do? They're going to be like,
Yeah,
sorry,
they're
Mr.
protecting the
Armed-
person who's carrying the
wait,
ballot.
Hello,
Is it true or
Mr.
not
Armed
then? Is it
Soldier.
true
I'm
or
actually
not?
going to tell you no. That is true. It happened. It happened.
You're describing it and making a narrative out of something that's absolutely false.
If
That's
you get
not what
3 days, you think
That's
3
not
days
what
is enough
gaslighting
time to organize a referendum on independence? 3 days with no media coverage, basically, except like the day
Can't
of.
hear Yankee.
3 days.
Burns is a liar.
Yankee, just
I
give
can't,
up.
Yankee. What do you?
I
why are you
think
even
he
here?
think
Get
he
a new
said
mic.
Dylan Burns is a fucking liar, which I agree with.
Can we just
course
give
you agree
Yankee
with
like a
Yankee
second?
Tankies.
Because
So's
he's
United.
barely at any time.
Yankee's fucking base. Oh no.
Nobody can hear him.
I know,
Are you-
it's the yelling is not helping that.
Okay,
he's just-
but
Alright, here. Let's
Nate,
here.
Give him-
Look, we've been going on this one for 2.5 hours, right? Like it's time that we do wrap this up. It was fucking amazing. But before we do this, Yankee Tanky, give us your last thoughts because we need them. We'll wait.
Well, my last thoughts have to be that regardless of your position, whether you support Russia or you support Ukraine, we should be vehemently against sending millions to
Yep.
from this country. It could be going to help children in Flint, Michigan, and Jackson, Mississippi get clean water when our infrastructure is falling apart, when people are literally starving in this country. You have no right to be in any, regardless of whose side you support. Period. Stop the funding to Ukraine.
No, after that take, I'm gonna be pro Russia. All right, priest. All right, I'm Queen Alexa. This was the political shit show. This show is a year old now. I've been doing this for a fucking year. It's insane to think about.
Congratulations.
I know. It's been 1 year today. I didn't even know it, but it's nuts.
Awesome.
If you what you saw, go to discord.gg/political shit show to join. Right, that's all I ask. All right, closing statements. Tell us where we can find you. Give us your final thoughts on this. We'll start with somebody online.
Queen Alexa, again, this has been an absolutely fantastic panel, as always. A very interesting conversation for the most part. There's a couple of folks here and there that, we need to work on conversational skills, but I'm sure we'll get there eventually. Again, I want to stress the importance of sovereign nations and their borders. You can't just go into a region with a bunch of military soldiers and be like, hey, everybody get the fuck out. And then ask the people that stayed there, hey, do you want to stay as part of this nation? Or that's not how this shit works, man. You can't go invading nations. You got to leave those countries alone and let them govern themselves. And you got a problem with them, get with the UN and we'll get it all sorted out for you. But anyway, I'm somebody online. I run a show on Tuesdays called The Political Annex because for the most part, I noticed that we all agree about the important stuff, especially here in the United States. So now that we all agree, we need to figure out what it is that we want to do once we get power. So everybody just come on over, just tell me what it is that you want to do, find a problem that you want to talk about, and then we'll find a solution for it. And we'll get it all together. We'll put it in the list, and one day we'll conquer the world together, me and you. Come on, we'll do it over on my channel. Come on, guys, let's go.
All right, Schlatsky.
The U.S. is not the world police. You can find me on twitch.tv/Schlatsky. That's all I got.
Alrighty, Nays Garden.
I'm Nays Garden all over the internet. Just look for @Nays Garden everywhere. Thank you for having me on here. This was very interesting and fun for me and my audience. So appreciate it, you guys, all of you.
Yep. All right, Nikki.
I just want to say there's a lot of propaganda on this war right now. So if you want to hear an opposing side, then I think it's a good idea to talk to other people. So please talk to Russian people if you can. And I don't care if people know my Twitch. You can find me. I'm in the politics section. I'm not going to say my name. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Non-smoker.
Hey, I'm at Twitch. .tv/non-smoker. The second O is a 0. Yeah, I don't know. Look, man, again, I just want to repeat what I said at the beginning, that it really feels like this discourse always goes a certain way. And that is, if you feel like there is any Russian perspective whatsoever, you're automatically a Russia supporter. And, look, I mean, at the end of the day, I try my best to be pragmatic. But ultimately, I have the interests of my own country at heart because I'm an American, and I just think we should not be supporting a war that's making life for the American people more difficult. And any, pretense that we have where we're like morally cleansing the world is usually just total bullshit. So, look, I mean, if you're interested in a rational, calm, friendly discussion, come and talk to me. I enjoyed it a lot. I like everybody here. So it's good to see everyone. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
All right. Ginger.
Again, I feel like Russia has no business being in Ukraine, regardless of Ukraine's history on themselves. Their sovereign nation. Russia needs to stay away. I am Ginger Ramoth. You can find me at twitch.tv/Ginger Ramoth with 2 R's. I do cosplay, panels, and video gaming.
Alrighty. Abolition.
Yeah, don't bother looking for me on Twitter or anything. It's dead anyway. You know what? Even beyond that, unfollow everybody here. And the people don't understand, this never came out, right? But like, I'm the people that are pro-Russia, where you're like anti-America specifically, like I'm with you, right? But I'm so past where you're at right now. I've come all the way around the other side. And I want America to be Mexico again. All right. It's my greatest dream. I think Mexico should annex America. And that's why I can sympathize with Russia wanting to recreate its former borders. But this is just one of those things where I'm going to go like, no, go fuck yourself. Take a javelin.
All right. Well, I saved the man who fought them all off and got all the questions, Dylan Burns.
I mean, I think people know my position on this. I don't think we should only continue to send weapons and supplies to Ukraine. We should be sending more than we're sending currently. We should be sending longer range missiles. We should be sending more anti-air power, definitely to stop the Russian terror campaign against Ukrainian electricity, which is actually what caused, the Polish missile strike. If the Russians weren't striking all of Ukraine's power centers, and they weren't freezing, then maybe Ukraine wouldn't be in such a desperate position that they'd be using 50-year-old Soviet air defense systems to fire them out of the sky. At every single point, Russia's pushed this conflict forward, whether it was when they, through economic coercion, tried to force Viktor Yanukovych to go back on his promise on entering the association agreement, whether it was their invasion of Crimea, where they were lying about it the whole time, whether it was them sending FSB agents into Ukraine, or sending weapons into Ukraine, or the shooting down of civilian airliners, or them lying about their troops on the border and eventually doing this invasion and levering Mariupol to the ground. And the behavior they've engaged in is incredibly disgusting, but it was also immoral for them to invade in the first place. They're in a country they have no right to be in, and the sooner they leave, the sooner this conflict ends. Them leaving Ukraine is not going to lead to Stefan Bandera rising from the grave, going to Moscow and killing all the Muscovites. It's not going to happen. And despite no matter how much Russian state TV tells you the trans, homo, gay, queer Nazis are coming for you, it's just not happening. Also, my chat voted for me to show my tattoo just to get a reaction. So anybody can see that. It has a little Z on it. Look at it. It has a little Z on it. It's like a little Z skull. My God.
Pretty good.
It's pretty based tattoo. Anyway, you guys have a good one. You can get me at Dylan Burns TV. You can also find me, I don't know, at your local CIA headquarters. Good job, but I think you downplayed Russian interference in the Donbass and not pushed back enough. Eternal civil war. Yeah, I tried to mention it at the end, but it is what it is. Anyone that says the people displaced don't get to vote, point out how pro-Israel that is. Amen. No Palestinian should be able to vote on the future of the West Bank. No Palestinian. That's the new rule, I guess. That's the new rule. DMs. Was anything in there important? No, they were all bad. Just Danabo begging me to leave this debate. Dylan, this sucks.